It all begins when terrifying creatures are drawn by humanity's miasma and start appearing on Earth. These frightening monsters became known everywhere as demons. The combat power these creatures possessed was immense and overwhelming. Because of this, they took countless human lives over the centuries. Despite all the suffering, the gods decided they would not abandon humanity. To give humans a fighting chance, they sent the manifestation blades, which were weapons forged with divine power. Those who managed to wield these sacred weapons became demon hunters, protecting everyone's peace. And at the absolute top of all hunters stood the strongest warrior of all. He was the greatest living hunter and served as the true symbol of that era. This legendary hero became known to everyone by the title of Blade Emperor. Led by the emperor of each generation, the hunters fought endlessly to save humanity. Nowadays, the current emperor says you can spot a good hunter with just a single glance. The assistant asks him to hurry up and choose a candidate from the list, as the academy is demanding a quick response. The hero says he is only looking for someone with a massive ego, making the assistant joke that he sounds like a villain talking like that. Having no patience for the emperor's stalling, the assistant gives up and says he will wait until tomorrow. But before hanging up, he begs the warrior to make a final decision once and for all. Kaname Akuda, the current Blade Emperor, sits thoughtfully inside his car about what choice he should make next. Meanwhile, the daily routine of studying continues peacefully at a city high school. Suddenly, a student runs desperately down the sidewalk, realizing he is super late for class. He uses a special speed technique to run faster, but ends up bumping into someone along the way. The poor guy who got shoved ends up falling face first directly into a pile of trash bags. Haruto Kamakiri, 17 years old, complains in pain and tells the kid to run down the middle of the street next time Haruto stands up, brushing off the dirt, and spots a little girl named Rika being closely escorted by her mother. A neighbor comments on the escort, and the mother explains that a lot of kidnappings of children chosen by the Blades have been happening lately. The neighbor is shocked and amazed to see the glowing mark of revelation on little Rika's hand. She agrees it is smart to protect her, since a child like that is now treated like a true national treasure. Those chosen by the gods receive this divine blessing so they can summon a powerful manifestation blade, and to achieve this miracle, the only strict requirement is having concentrated spiritual energy. At that moment, the gossipy neighbor smiles and remarks that there are always sad exceptions to this rule. People on the street whisper as Haruto walks by, commenting that he has absolutely zero spiritual energy. Cruel rumors continue to spread, saying his parents passed away in an accident and that his relatives suffered greatly as well. After all, spiritual energy is the beacon the gods use to guide power to the chosen ones. Haruto walks with his head down, completely exhausted from hearing the same mean gossip every single day. The crowd on the street keeps whispering about the insulting nickname they gave the boy. Because of his condition, he spent his entire life being called the abandoned by the gods. Without the energy that every human is supposed to have, Haruto feels there is no place in the world for someone defective like him. He knows very well that he is weak and has to endure the taunts of his classmates for not knowing how to use basic techniques. In physical education class, nobody wants to partner up with him because everyone thinks he will never accomplish anything. Suddenly, in an act of bullying, Haruto's desk is violently slammed to the floor. A few school bullies approach and say it is time to teach the kid his place. One of the guys gives a mean smirk and warns that they are going to have some fun with him today too. Haruto just stares back annoyed, knowing these humiliating taunts will never stop happening. The attacker lands a heavy physical blow directly to the boy's stomach, knocking the wind out of him as he groans in pain. The force of the strike is so strong that it sends Haruto flying backward, crashing right onto a trash bin. The delinquents laugh out loud and celebrate the boy's fall as if they had just scored a perfect bowling strike. Haruto tries to move on the courtyard floor while groaning in pain from the hits he just took. The bullies shout at him to get up right now and clean up the mess, because their little game is only halfway through. Haruto can only think that no matter how much they demand he stand up, his body has already hit its absolute limit. One of the guys calls out to their group leader, complaining out loud that weak Haruto is ignoring their orders. The leader, who was relaxing with a girl in his lap, turns around annoyed and warns that he had already given a warning before Hibiki stomps hard on Haruto's head and says that today he is just going to serve as a soccer ball. He asks if Haruto is trying to make him look like a liar, while the poor guy can barely manage a response. At that moment, Hibiki summons his manifestation blade engulfed in flames, making the situation even more cruel. With a cynical smile, he says he just wants his friends to have a very comfortable school life. The other guys whisper in horror about how insane Hibiki is and how he has dangerous connections outside of school. Hibiki begins burning Haruto's hand with the hot blade, making the boy scream and beg him to stop. The bully pretends to cry and asks if he will need to burn his other hand too, so he can learn his lesson. Completely out of strength, Haruto gives in and screams that he agrees to be his soccer ball just to make the torture end. Left abandoned on the ground in the middle of the garbage, Haruto cries, asking himself why bad things always happen to him. He bitterly laments suffering so much without ever having done anything wrong to anyone. A school hallway monitor finally shows up and shouts, asking what on earth is going on there. Hibiki and his crew decide to leave, secretly planning their preparations for that night. The monitor sighs annoyed at seeing Haruto down on the ground again and calls him by his last name. Instead of helping, the man just complains that the boy is always causing trouble at school. The man orders him to clean up that whole mess, making it clear that the blame always ended up falling on Haruto himself. In that moment of loneliness, he realizes with complete clarity that he has absolutely zero allies in the world. Because of that, asking anyone for help is something he gave up on a long time ago. As evening falls, the news reports that a massive demon portal has appeared in a nearby region. A colossal monster was spotted, but the Blade Emperor acted quickly and minimized the damage to a minimum. Little Rika watches the video super excited and comments to her dad about how incredible she thinks the hero is. She states firmly that she is also going to be a hunter in the future so she can protect everyone. The father encourages his daughter, while Haruto watches them from a distance and recognizes her as the girl from that morning. He feels a sting of envy and silently wishes he also possessed spiritual energy like her. Suddenly, a loud noise startles Rika's father, who asks in panic who those men are. To the girl's absolute terror, one of the intruders slashes her father with a manifestation blade. The kidnappers grab Rika by force, ordering her to be gagged quickly so they can throw her into the back of the van. Haruto watches while hiding and is shocked to recognize that familiar voice in the middle of the attack. The girl's father falls heavily injured to the ground. After receiving the deep strike to his back, Haruto immediately remembers that glowing, dangerous weapon he saw earlier that day. The criminals slam the van door shut hard and step on the gas to speed away from the scene. He takes a hesitant step forward and reaches out his hand in an attempt to make the van stop. Despair takes over the boy as he realizes he just witnessed a violent kidnapping. He realizes there is nobody else around and tries to convince himself that this is none of his business. Rika's father cries on the ground, calling out desperately for his kidnapped daughter Haruto, feels overwhelmed by the situation and questions why he always has to go through this. Consumed by anger, he curses at himself and starts sprinting after the kidnappers without thinking twice. While dialing emergency services, he wonders what a weak guy like him could possibly do. A little while later, the criminals park the van at an abandoned construction site during the night. Haruto arrives at the location completely out of breath, thankful that they parked so close by. He hides behind a metal structure upon hearing a sound coming from inside the warehouse. Two henchmen take off their masks, complaining about the heat, while the other tells them to shut their mouths. Upon seeing the faces of the two, he confirms his suspicions that their leader really is Hibiki. Hibiki steps outside to make a phone call and orders his cronies to keep a close eye on the kidnapped girl. Haruto knows Rika is trapped inside and fears the criminals will escape before the police arrive. Realizing he needs to act fast, he decides to take a dangerous step and approaches the van. Without wasting time, the boy uses all his strength to break the rear window of the vehicle. The van alarm starts going off loudly, startling the henchmen who were nearby. The criminals immediately rush toward the noise to check out what is going on. Taking advantage of the distraction, Haruto slips into the warehouse and asks Rika to keep absolute silence. The little girl is lying on the floor, her arms and legs tied up with a gag over her mouth. Haruto tries to calm the frightened girl, assuring her that he came there specifically to save her. While untying her ropes, he asks if she can walk and suggests they sneak out quietly. Rika cries tears of relief and thanks the boy with all the sincerity in her heart. Hearing the girl's genuine gratitude, Haruto is caught off guard and feels something different deep inside. He realizes that for the very first time in his entire life, someone actually thanked him for something. However, his joy is short-lived when one of the criminals suddenly appears out of the shadows. Haruto is hit square in the face by a powerful punch without any chance to defend himself. Hibiki steps on Haruto and mocks the situation, joking that yesterday's ball rolled all the way to their hideout. The gang of criminals begins kicking and beating Haruto mercilessly, taunting his heroic little plan. They tie Haruto's arms up high, and one delinquent gets ready to strike him with a heavy wooden plank. As the attackers laugh cruelly, the boy suffers in silence from the extreme pain racking his entire body. At the absolute limit of his physical strength, Haruto starts shouting frantically for help. The attackers laugh loudly and say that no one is going to show up to save a useless punching bag like him. Even covered in blood, Haruto smirks, thinking he managed to buy enough time for the police to arrive. At that moment, a blue-haired man in a stylish suit enters the place, praising Hibiki's work. Hibiki shows great respect and calls him the underboss, revealing that he was just following the orders sent to him. The mobster examines the captive girl and comments that chosen children are valuable for brainwashing. He says he can sell her for a high price or use her massive spiritual energy in other cruel ways. The man notices the tied-up Haruto and asks with contempt what that kid is doing there. Hibiki explains he was a witness, but the boss complains that he was soft and orders him to be eliminated right away. Shrugging at the situation, the delinquent readies his flaming sword once again to deliver the final blow. Hanging by the ropes, Haruto panics as he realizes the police still haven't arrived to rescue them. He knows he will be taken out right here and that they will carry little Rika away if he doesn't do something now. With the last bit of strength he has left, Haruto screams furiously, ordering them to let the little girl go. But Hibiki doesn't listen, says a ball shouldn't speak, and plunges the blade straight into the boy's chest. The strike pierces right through Haruto's body, leaving the young man shocked and on the verge of fading away in seconds as blood pours out. He deeply regrets not being able to fulfill his wish to save her. However, within the darkness of his mind, a pair of gigantic purple eyes suddenly snaps open. Haruto wakes up lying on a gray floor, surrounded by dozens of mysterious swords thrust into the ground. The boy stands up confused, trying to understand where he is and remembering he was just stabbed. To his complete amazement, upon checking his own body, he notices he doesn't have a single wound or scar. A mysterious voice echoes, explaining that this place is his mental world, and asks who is standing there. The voice says that being on the edge of fading away allowed him to look deep within himself, and asks where he is looking. Haruto comes face to face with a colossal, terrifying creature that materializes right before his eyes. The boy's shock is so overwhelming that he can barely put a sentence together in front of that crushing presence. The creature officially introduces itself as the god of calamity, Magatsukami, an entity forgotten even by the gods. The boy becomes suspicious and wonders if this terrifying entity is really part of the gods who grant blades. The giant god proposes a solemn pact with Haruto, promising to grant a single genuine wish from the young man. He warns that by accepting the pact, the boy will have to sacrifice absolutely everything to accomplish his goal. Confused and tense, Haruto questions what that terrifying entity really means by those conditions. The god of calamity simply warns that if he refuses, he will perish and rot exactly as he is in reality. The creature demands his life as payment and tells him to state a wish worthy of being granted immediately. Although he feels the situation is extremely dark, Haruto is certain that the entity will truly keep its promise. Knowing this, the boy's initial impulse is to ask the god to save little Rika's life right away. However, he cuts himself off as he remembers all the suffering he went through, realizing his true desire. He screams from the bottom of his soul, begging for power so that even a nobody like him can save whoever he wants. The god of calamity is surprised to realize the boy is willing to give up his own life just to save others. But the boy interrupts him immediately with a firm shout, denying the entity's interpretation right away. He confesses that up until that moment, he lived merely like an aimless ghost, never truly feeling alive. But everything changed when that little girl trusted him and used her last bit of strength to thank him sincerely. That hug and Rika's gratitude made him feel truly alive for the very first time. He decides that if he can experience that exact same feeling again, he will gladly give up his life. So, for his own sake, he asks the god for the power necessary to crush and overcome any obstacle. The entity finds this wish magnificent and says such a giant ego is completely worthy of a god of calamity. The Supreme Being then decides to grant him his grand and destructive power of the 10 Claws of Calamity. He officially bestows the legendary power of the 10 Claws of Calamity directly upon the boy. The god warns that this is power in exchange for the young man's very life, telling him to use it as he sees fit. Back in reality, the delinquents grab the unconscious girl, and the boss orders everyone to leave the site. Suddenly, the underboss and Hibiki stop in their tracks, terrified by a strange presence emerging right there. In the dark night sky, the moon shines intensely with a blood-red color, signaling a miracle. A purple beam of light falls from the sky, initiating the phenomenon that occurs when a god grants power to a human. This revelation creates a fantastic anomaly that alters reality and affects the entire world around them. It is a grand spectacle that usually brings immense joy and wonder to anyone who witnesses it. However, the revelation unfolding before Haruto brings a red sword and an extremely dark energy. The atmosphere shifts completely, proving that the form of the revelation depends on the type of god granting power. Hibiki and his cronies are sweating in terror, unable to understand what kind of bizarre, frightening power is emerging. At that moment, Haruto steps forward, walking tall, with pure white hair and a dark red aura swirling around him. With a cold, intimidating glare, he calmly commands them to take their hands off the little girl immediately. The criminals fall into shock and start shaking as they see that the kid who was supposed to be gone is standing tall. He firmly grips his new manifestation blade, emanating an overwhelming force that terrifies everyone. Hibiki can barely believe that the guy with zero spiritual energy managed to summon a manifestation blade. The underboss tells everyone to stop shaking and orders them to eliminate Haruto once and for all. Right then and there, Haruto takes a combat stance and firmly repeats for them to let the girl go. Right now, Hibiki rushes in to attack while laughing, saying that amateurs who just got a blade always get arrogant. He swings downward with his flaming blade, shouting for the boy to repent in hell. With total composure and focus, Haruto simply watches his opponent's attack come closer. With a single, quick, precise movement, he strikes back and slices Hibiki's flaming sword right in half. Hibiki stands in absolute shock, staring at his powerful divine weapon completely shattered. The impact of Haruto's counterattack is so violent that it generates a massive shockwave, sending Hibiki flying. The delinquent screams in desperation as he is hurled backward by the devastating force of the blow. The slice was so powerful that it carved a deep fissure directly into the concrete floor of the construction site. Haruto reflects that it was on that exact chaotic day that he finally managed to obtain his true power. He remembers he was a nobody rejected by everyone, but chose to change his own destiny. He claimed that dark sword to cut down and destroy any barrier standing in his way. Somewhere else, the assistant frantically calls the Blade Emperor to alert him about the sky anomaly. Kanami watches it all casually while eating ramen, remarking that a kid with a terrible fate has just emerged. The assistant shouts in outrage over him, eating ramen calmly during a catastrophe-level revelation. Kaname tells him to stay calm and says everything in life has priorities, while the assistant keeps screaming into the phone. The Blade Emperor thanks for the delicious meal and starts walking toward the location of the incident. He reflects that no matter the type of divine revelation, whoever wields the blade is always guided by human ego. And he concludes that judging whether this ego is good or evil is the true duty of the Blade Emperor. Meanwhile, the frightening red revelation continues shining brightly in the night sky over the city. People on the streets stare in fear and start taking photos of that mysterious anomaly in the sky. Regardless of the type of power granted by the gods, it is human desire that truly controls the sword. Kaname repeats to himself that deciding whether the new warrior is an ally or a threat is his sole mission. The scene focuses on the abandoned construction site under the full red moon, where the decisive battle began. Haruto sees that Rika is fine, and the little spirit of the god explains she just passed out due to his aura. Relieved, he gives a gentle smile, making the little creature tease him for the silly face he is making. Next, he looks at the surrounding damage and can hardly believe he actually caused all that destruction. The little god informs him that he fulfilled his part of the deal and that now it's Haruto's turn to help him with his true goal. The little god starts explaining his goal, but his voice begins to glitch and fade away mysteriously. Haruto tells him he can't hear properly and asks if their connection suddenly grew weak. The god tells Haruto to listen carefully and try to draw out the true hidden power of his new divine sword. Extremely confused, the young man tries calling the entity several times, but realizes he vanished completely. He complains to himself, thinking it's pointless to tell him to unleash a power he doesn't even know how to use. Meanwhile, the injured underboss tries to crawl and sneak away from there to save his own skin. The man panics, thinking Haruto's power was ridiculous and far more insane than Hibiki's strength. He decides to run away right then and there, swearing never to get involved in such a dangerous situation again. However, the Blade Emperor suddenly appears right in front of him, casually checking his cell phone. Kanami reads his criminal record out loud, listing horrible crimes and calling him absolute human trash. Annoyed, the mobster shouts and charges to attack the Blade Emperor, trying to force his way through. Without putting in any effort, the hero dodges the violent attack and comments that he already understands the whole situation. With just one swift strike of his sword, the Blade Emperor takes down the underboss instantly. He announces that the criminal has been successfully captured and sarcastically remarks that doing bad things is illegal. Haruto watches the scene in shock and wonders in fear who that mysterious man is and where he came from. The Blade Emperor approaches and asks if the young man was responsible for all that destruction at the site. He introduces himself simply as a hunter passing by and shows his official demon hunter license. The hero examines the giant slash mark on the ground and praises the incredible shockwave of Haruto's attack. But he notes that the strike only threw the enemy far away without causing any severe physical wounds to his body. Haruto keeps holding his manifestation blade, feeling dark energy emanating strongly from the metal. Kanami wonders, in surprise, how a rookie kid can already release so much destructive power all at once. He realizes the dark energy flowing from the sword is directly linked to that terrible anomaly in the sky. With a serious look, the hero warns that a dangerous, evil god seems to be dwelling inside that sword. He can visualize the terrifying presence of the Calamity entity protecting the young warrior inside the boy's mind. The little god of Calamity just laughs and agrees that he can't deny that fact. Determined to prevent a major danger to the world, Kanami calmly warns that he will need to destroy that sword. The boy gets extremely frightened, unable to comprehend why he wants to break his only defensive weapon. Before the young man can react, the Blade Emperor attacks swiftly, and their two swords collide with massive force. The impact of the clash between the two warriors is so colossal that it causes the surrounding warehouse walls to crumble. Haruto complains angrily after being thrown back, saying he was attacked out of nowhere and almost lost his life right there. Kanami calmly explains that a demon hunter's duty is also to protect world peace from any threat. The young man gets back up. While the hero notices he managed to withstand his direct strike, Kanami praises the kid for holding onto the sword without letting it shatter, revealing that he didn't go easy on him. He explains that clinging to that kind of dark power is dangerous and assures him he doesn't want to hurt the boy. Haruto questions if his weapon is truly so dangerous that it must be treated as a major global threat. But he remembers he obtained this strength in exchange for his own life and that he must use it. Until the very end, the Emperor tells him to surrender and hand over the weapon peacefully, but the young man rejects the request instantly. Seeing his stubbornness, the hero apologizes and says he will have to carry out his duty by force, using his divine power. Haruto grips the hilt of the sword with determination, knowing he cannot and will not give up that strength now. The hero moves at insane speed, firing lightning-fast blasts of yellow energy straight toward the young man. Haruto manages to react just in time to block one of Kanami's quick strikes, causing bright sparks to fly into the air. The Blade Emperor attacks from multiple angles, forcing the boy to use all his agility to defend, feeling the extreme pressure of the combat. The young man pushes himself to the limit to withstand the power of the strikes. The yellow energy blasts begin cutting down and destroying the support beams of the construction site around them. The sheer force of the battle causes absolute havoc, causing large sections of the warehouse structure to collapse. Haruto leaps back nimbly to dodge the heavy concrete debris falling from the ceiling. Still mid-air, he sees that the Emperor's trails of yellow light keep pursuing him without giving any breathing room. Kanami praises the boy's quick reflexes, while creating a barrier of light attacks surrounding him. Desperate, Haruto realizes his opponent is getting faster and faster, and that he has already hit his physical limit. The Blade Emperor says he completely understands the desire to cling to a strong power, but warns that things don't work like that. With a small cut on his cheek, Haruto focuses with everything he has to try and predict the next attack. Kanami points his shining golden blade and asks what he truly wants to achieve with that dark power. The young man screams that he wants to save people, but Kanami finds it admirable, yet a response he cannot trust with a serious and furious glare. Haruto screams from the bottom of his soul that he is telling the truth. He remembers that saving that little girl was the only time he felt his life actually had any value. Kaname says he just got drunk on the power of the manifestation blade after feeling the joy of helping someone. The hero warns him that taking a life for the first time or finding pleasure in slicing others down can also feel good. He warns that the boy risks becoming a prisoner to that dark power and going around attacking people endlessly. Haruto remains steadfast in his combat stance, refusing to lower his guard at his words. Suddenly, more heavy rubble falls from the damaged structure of that collapsing construction site. The Blade Emperor says he can do good without needing that power, and asks if that isn't enough. Completely exhausted, Haruto breathes heavily as he tries to catch his breath. Kanami realizes the young man's strike was surprisingly impressive for an amateur, reflecting on how uncertain his future is. The hero concludes that this boy could bring either salvation or destruction, acting like a double-edged sword. Thinking that making him fight further would only cause him more pain, the Emperor decides it's time to deliver the final blow. He strikes hard, firing a giant pillar of brilliant golden energy straight at Haruto. The boy falls into total panic as he feels the terrifying, crushing pressure of that attack heading his way. He begins shaking uncontrollably, feeling a terror far worse than when he was about to pass away in the trash. The hero warns him coldly that he will perish if he takes the strike and tells him to drop the sword right now to save himself. Haruto thinks that maybe there are people he will only be able to save if he holds that weapon of divine power in his hands. With pure determination, he screams that it would be a total waste to give up all this divine strength now. The Blade Emperor is thoroughly surprised by that completely unexpected answer coming from the young man. A subtle smile appears on the hero's face as he notices the true resolve shining in the young man's eyes. He accepts Haruto's choice and says he can hate him, taking the blame for failing to convince him with words. The two swords collide with monstrous force, generating an incredible explosion of red and golden energy. The devastating impact of the clash completely obliterates the floor of the construction site in a massive cloud of smoke. The voice of the god of calamity echoes in the boy's mind, telling him not to give up and reminding him of the pact they made. He explains that Haruto's dark sword possesses the divine power to cut through absolutely anything he decides to slice. The god reveals that the blade grows infinitely sharper according to the strength of his own spiritual resolve. Gathering all the remaining energy he has left, Haruto lets out a roaring battle cry to push his attack forward. The final clash creates an immense impact that shatters the surrounding concrete ground and hurls them both backward. A fragment of a broken blade flies through the blue sky, showing that one of the weapons ended up destroyed in the collision. Haruto manages to pull himself together after being thrown back by the brutal force of that last clash. On his knees on the destroyed ground, the boy groans in pain, feeling extreme fatigue taking over his entire body. The boy looks in shock at the ground and realizes one of the swords actually broke from the force of the impact. To Haruto's absolute astonishment, the person holding the broken blade in his hands is the Blade Emperor himself. Kaname calmly praises the boy for not letting go of his divine weapon for a single moment during the fight. The hero sheathes his weapon and smiles, saying that now he can finally believe in the purity of the young man's heart. Haruto is left extremely confused, unable to understand why that terrifying battle stopped all of a sudden. The hero informs him he won't break his sword anymore and starts using green magic to heal the boy's injuries. The boy asks the reason for all this, and Kaname smiles, explaining that hunters communicate through their blades. He says he felt that Haruto's desire to save people for his own sake is an absolute truth. Kaname confesses that during that final clash of swords, he managed to clearly see the true essence of his soul. The hero assures him that as long as he keeps his resolve firm, there will be no reason to confiscate his divine weapon. Realizing what he did, Haruto bows frantically and apologizes for breaking the Emperor's precious sword. Kaname tells him not to worry, but the boy insists that a sword should be like a hunter's very life. Laughing at the situation, Kaname reveals that it was just a cheap replica from his fake sword collection. In a serious tone, he warns that he is the only one who trusts him right now, and that he will have to prove his worth to the rest of the world. The Blade Emperor says that first and foremost, the boy needs to learn to control his new sword properly. He offers to help him with training, revealing with a smile that he already knows the perfect place for it. Kaname smiles and warns that the first thing he is going to do is recommend him for the entrance exam of a certain academy. The boy stares at him with a look of total surprise, not fully understanding what he just heard. The hero mentions that he must have heard of Togoku Academy, the main gateway for prospective hunters, and he says that by studying at this famous academy, Haruto's grand goal will be to finally become an official hunter. The Blade Emperor proudly repeats the name of the prestigious hunter training institution. He reiterates that he wants to see the young man studying there and training hard to develop his full combat potential. Just 2 days pass by quickly, and the story skips ahead to the start of the entrance exam. He apologizes for the last-minute notice and hands over a letter of recommendation he wrote himself for the boy to carry. Haruto holds the paper tightly at the school entrance, barely believing he actually had the courage to go there. The renowned Togoku National Academy is known as the highest-level training center for new hunters. Looking around, Haruto is amazed to see the enormous crowd of talented young candidates gathered for the test. He notices that absolutely every candidate there already wields a manifestation blade of their own. Not wanting to be left behind, he summons his own dark sword of red energy and prepares for the challenge. He remembers the advice to try to draw out the true value and hidden power of his new divine weapon. Haruto thinks that ever since the fight, the entity hasn't spoken to him, and hopes to learn to control this strength at school. He wonders if they will be able to talk again if he manages to pass the exams and enter the academy. With strong resolve, the young man repeats to himself that he will use that divine blade solely to save people. Feeling motivated, he decides to give it his absolute all now that he has finally found a true purpose for his life. Suddenly, Konami pops up out of nowhere behind him, slapping his back and startling the boy, who jumps in surprise. The hero remembers he hadn't formally introduced himself yet, and friendly tells him to just call him Akuta Haruto, thanks him for the recommendation, but mentions he still hasn't received any detailed explanation on how the exam works. Akuta makes a funny face, realizing he actually forgot to explain, leaving the boy super worried about the test. The veteran hunter holds up 3 fingers and calmly explains that the entrance exam consists of 3 total stages. He says each stage is worth 100 points, and the final score will depend on the total sum of 300 possible points. Haruto fears he doesn't know how to fight with blades, but the master tells him not to worry and just focus on having the courage to win. Giving a thumbs up, he assures the young man he will do great. Though the boy continues to doubt him quite a bit, the sound system announces that the first stage is about to begin and orders all candidates to head to the room with their slips. Akuta explains that the first phase is just a written exam on general knowledge and tells him not to get too nervous. Smiling, the Blade Emperor says he is excited to see what kind of path the young man will carve with his new sword. Haruto respectfully agrees and decides that the time has finally come to take the first major step. Feeling butterflies in his stomach, the boy tries to calm down, remembering he received the backing of a professional hunter. He walks purposefully toward the hallway, indicated by the signs, swearing to give his absolute best on the test. Already at his desk, the young man trusts his intelligence, knowing he was always very good at normal theoretical studies. But upon receiving the question sheet and looking at the content of the written test, the boy is totally shell-shocked. He panics as he realizes the questions have absolutely nothing to do with standard school subjects. The first question asks to detail advanced escape and stealth techniques using earth elemental magic. Seeing the other complex questions about astrology and divine rituals, Haruto mentally screams in pure despair. Outside, Akuta eats peacefully, unaware that the general knowledge test is meant exclusively for experienced hunters. Exiting the exam room, the other candidates chat happily, commenting on the high scores they managed to pull off. Meanwhile, poor Haruto walks like a floating ghost, desperate because he barely answered anything. In the middle of the courtyard, an annoyed, familiar voice shouts loudly, calling out Haruto's last name. To the young man's surprise, the gossipy monitor from his old school appears, pointing his finger in anger. The man huffs and complains, saying that the kid with 0 spiritual energy is only good for creating trouble wherever he goes. Haruto timidly tries to explain that a real hunter was the one who wrote a recommendation letter for him. The monitor yells that it's a lie and demands to see the boy's registration slip right that second. Haruto freezes in terror, remembering the trauma of all the humiliations he suffered from that man in the past. The man inspects the paper and is surprised to notice that the registration slip is actually legitimate. But looking at the score field for the first stage, he sees the tragic result of just 2 points out of 100. He starts yelling scandalized upon seeing the ridiculous score, asking if the boy has no sense of his place in the world. The other candidates start gossiping as they hear the commotion, laughing at the kid rejected for lacking spiritual power. In a rage, the man rips Haruto's paper right in half and screams that trash with no energy should just go home. He says that seeing someone weak like him taking that exam is a true insult to all demon hunters. Next, the monitor turns his back and calls the other students to keep moving and focus on the tests. Haruto stands frozen, but remembers his master's promise about carving his own path with that dark sword. He falls to his knees on the cold floor, staring heartbroken at the ripped pieces of his registration slip. The scene jumps forward, showing the entrance to the massive gymnasium where the second practical stage will take place. The system announces that the second test will be a practical evaluation of aptitude with each person's manifestation blade. The first group evaluated is the destruction type, focused on warriors who fight on the front lines of combat. The next group focuses on the support type, evaluating tactical aid abilities and protective barriers. And the final group is the healing type, evaluating those blessed with the divine gift to regenerate and heal wounds. The announcer guides all candidates to head to their respective booths that best represent their abilities. A pink-haired examiner welcomes everyone to the destruction sector, stating it is the elite division of combat. She explains that the practical test is simple: land a powerful hit with full energy against a stone statue. She warns that the statue has the durability of an average demon and that a weak attack might make the weapon bounce back. The youths feel anxious as they hear the command to step forward. As soon as they are ready to strike, candidate number 104 steps up confidently, unleashing a swift slash wrapped in intense green light. However, his attack bounces hard off the tough stone, sending the boy flying back onto the ground. He stands shocked, seeing his divine weapon repelled, realizing the stone statue is harder than steel. The examiner notes that leaving even a scratch is a decent result and awards 50 points to the frightened youth. Next, a candidate named Sato steps forward, gathering heavy electrical energy around his blade. With a battle cry, he delivers a crushing sword strike charged with yellow lightning against the statue. The examiner evaluates the deep crack left by the electricity and excitedly announces a score of 65 points. The proud monitor rushes over to praise Sato, shouting excitedly that he is the true prodigy and star of their school. The boy smiles cockily, boasting about using lightning magic to cut straight into the statue's stone. Suddenly, everyone in the venue goes silent upon seeing a blue-haired young man walking calmly past a split statue. The pink-haired examiner lets out a whisper of deep admiration at the spectacular destruction she just witnessed. She enthusiastically announces a perfect score of 100 points for the complete destruction of the stone statue, shocking the monitor and Sato. The crowd goes into a frenzy, whispering that the mysterious guy is on a completely different level of power. With absolute elegance and composure, the blue-haired youth sheathes his powerful sword without saying a single word. The entire sports gym falls into an absolute tense silence as they watch the young man's graceful movements. The prodigy coldly tells everyone to shut their mouths and tells them to keep their focus solely on their own test swords. The examiner thinks impressed that he shifted the entire mood of the Sei room just by sheathing his weapon. Feeling sorry for whoever goes next, she realizes that heavy tension created by his power won't disappear anytime soon for the rest of the test. Meanwhile, Akuda and a co-worker observe all the movement of the candidates from up on the mezzanine balcony. The man beside him recognizes the prodigy as the second son of the prestigious Ryudoji family, praising his noble bloodline. He claims with certainty that the boy will rank number 1 overall. Celebrating the arrival of such talented candidates, Akuda gives a cynical smile and repeats the word mysteriously, making a thoughtful face about the matter. The colleague asks if there is a double meaning, but the hero casually changes the subject so as not to raise suspicion. On the other side, the prodigy walks annoyed, arrogantly thinking the general level of the other candidates is ridiculous and low. Suddenly, he bumps shoulders hard with Haruto, who comes running frantically and lets out a groan from the collision. The shocked boy starts apologizing while bowing his head repeatedly, explaining he got delayed for a moment. Stepping into the sports gym, Haruto looks around confused as he notices the absolute silence in the huge facility. The boy asks him if the test is already over because of the silence, but the prodigy just ignores him coldly without replying. The examiner announces that the testing is drawing to a close, causing Haruto to raise his hand and run while shouting his number. The blue-haired prodigy grumbles in anger about his tardiness, but stops in his tracks as he feels his own sword suddenly vibrate. He looks back in complete shock, unable to understand why his manifestation blade is reacting to the boy's presence. However, in a funny twist, clumsy Haruto trips over his own feet and falls face first onto the grass of the field right in front of everyone. The blue-haired prodigy watches him on the ground with disdain, trying to convince himself that it was just a silly coincidence. The boy jumps up in a hurry and hands his torn registration slip, taped back together, over to the examiner. The sheet clearly displays his name, his registration number, and the tragic result of just 2 points on the first test. The pink-haired examiner tells Haruto to step up whenever he is ready, and he responds that he is good to go. People in the crowd whisper with scorn, unable to believe Haruto is actually going to attempt the test when he doesn't even have spiritual energy. Haruto takes his stance on the training field and begins focusing to activate his strength. He remembers past humiliations and how people called him trash for having no talent to be a hunter. Despite all the hardship, Haruto decides to press forward and draws his weapon with an immense red energy. The examiner is shocked by what she sees, while Akuda watches everything with a confident smile next to Kusabi. With a quick and precise motion, Haruto delivers a powerful strike of red energy straight at the target. On the other side of the academy, a minion praises the son of the Ryudoji family and says he heard a very interesting rumor. He reveals that there is a candidate recommended by the Blade Emperor himself, leaving young Master Ryudoji surprised. The young master hears the name of Kamakiri Haruto as he walks past a colossal destroyed statue. He observes that the slash on the stone was extremely brutal and notes that the author of the attack still lacks control over his power. The young man quickly realizes that this lack of refinement explains why his own weapon reacted so strongly. Meanwhile, Haruto feels the strain of the attack on his body and realizes the impact of the strength he just used. The boy sheathes his sword as the dust settles, and the surrounding crowd begins whispering, thoroughly impressed. The scoreboard displays total destruction and confirms that Haruto achieved a perfect score on the second test. He remembers the promise to keep moving forward always to pursue what he truly wants to do with his life. Determined not to let insults get to him, his total score is updated to 102 points. The examiners think that every year, a new raw and promising talent emerges during the academy's testing. The scene shifts to the examiner's room, where a very important conversation is about to begin. The examiners watch attentively as videos of the best candidates play across the monitoring screens in the room. They comment that this year's big revelation is extremely intriguing and draws a lot of attention. Akuda proudly states he found a true rare gem and asks if his colleague agrees with him. Kusabi crosses his arms and coldly responds that he cannot agree with Akuda's opinion. Kusabi questions if the Blade Emperor thought he wouldn't. Notice the sinister aura dwelling in the boy's weapon. The man states seriously that the boy brought in by Akuda is actually a seed of big trouble. Akuda says he expected his colleague to keep an eye on the young man, but Kusabi guarantees he will fail before that even happens. At that moment, Akuda surprises his colleague by proposing a bet on the boy's future in the exam. He proposes that if Haruto takes first place in the third stage, Kusabi will have to train him personally. Kusabi listens to the proposal suspiciously and asks what he stands to win. If the Blade Emperor loses, Akuda smiles and promises to fulfill any wish within his power as the Blade Emperor. Kusabi accepts the challenge on the spot, confident that the bet will be highly advantageous for him. The man thinks that the third phase will test the very essence of a true demon hunter. He decides he wants to see with his own eyes how much potential the boy really has hidden away. The candidates gather in a dark, narrow hallway, finding the location chosen for the third test unusual. Haruto resolves to face any challenge to make up for the failure of the first test and manage to pass. Suddenly, a bearded examiner rings a loud bell to grab everyone's attention. The man announces in a firm tone that the third phase of the entrance exam is starting at that exact moment. He explains that their task will be a hunt and that they must defeat as many demons as possible in 3 hours. The instructor reveals that the test will take place in a restricted area of the academy called the Demon Reserve. He details that the forest draws negative energy directly from the ley lines of the region. The area is controlled so that creatures ranging only from low to intermediate rank appear. Hearing that they will face intermediate rank demons, Haruto gets tense about the difficulty. The examiner asks if everyone received an identification tag at the entrance of the venue. He explains that the item will teleport them to the medical bay should they become unable to fight. He warns that anyone rescued by the spell will receive 0 points and that the rules are on the back of the tag. The man highlights that knowing when to retreat from danger when necessary is also part of a hunter's qualities. After the explanation finishes, Haruto prepares to give it his all and strike with full force right from the start. However, things don't go exactly as the young man planned for the start of the test. The instructor announces that only candidates with 191 points or more may enter first. With that, the elite competitors step forward to officially kick off the third phase of the test. Toya Ryudoji, the overall first place with 198 points, stands out as an absolute favorite in the third test. The instructor warns that the next group will start in 5 minutes, while Haruto worriedly realizes his situation is tough. 45 minutes pass, and it is finally time for the last group to prepare to enter the dangerous forest. The examiner advises Haruto not to overexert himself and just do his best, and the boy politely agrees with the warning. As soon as the start signal is given for the last group, Haruto takes off sprinting toward the academy's dark forest. The examiner watches from afar, becoming thoughtful as he remembers that someone had an extremely low score on the previous test. The young man calculates that the monsters near the entrance have already been cleared and decides to hurry deeper into the forest. Suddenly, he realizes with amazement that his body feels extremely light and his movements are on a far superior level. He recalls that when he faced Akuda in the past, he managed to move in an incredible way he had never imagined before. The boy realizes that this mysterious power has been surging from within him since the moment he obtained his manifestation blade. He finally comprehends that he is channeling true spiritual energy and applying heavy physical reinforcement to himself. Super hyped by the discovery, Haruto wonders, amazed if he actually just flew through the air for a second. He gets emotional about being able to see and experience the exact same world of power and energy that other hunters live in. With completely renewed focus, the young man concentrates on advancing swiftly in his search. Right then, a fierce wolf suddenly pounces on him, making Haruto realize he accidentally let his guard down. He manages to block the beast's fangs with his weapon and realizes the damage he would have taken had he received that blow directly. As he holds off the attack frantically, the young man gets startled by the situation, but notices something very strange right after Haruto manages to push the creature away easily and realizes its attack was actually way lighter than he expected. He compares the monster's strength to the terrible impact of the blow he had taken from Akuta during their previous encounter, with a quick, precise counterattack. The young man uses his powerful red blade to slice the low-rank demon right down the middle. Haruto gives a confident smile and celebrates upon realizing that type of weak opponent poses zero threat to him. He celebrates his victory and decides to maintain a steady pace to defeat as many weak enemies as possible in the test. Further ahead, a girl in blue robes spots a pack of creatures in the treetops and notices the danger is only escalating. Her orange-haired teammate tells her to stop complaining and get ready to attack alongside her at the perfect moment. The other girls order the girl with glasses to support the group with magic, and she nervously responds that she will help. The girl with glasses concentrates and uses her green spiritual energy to channel a strong protective barrier around them. Supported by wind magic, the orange-haired girl leaps forward with everything to land a blow against one of the monsters. A powerful rock-trapping magic is activated to bind the beasts and prevent them from moving any further. One of the beasts manages to slip away, but the teammate in blue quickly dashes in to eliminate it with a nice flame strike. She comments excitedly that with good teamwork against these weak monsters, they can reach a great rank. However, in a fraction of a second, and without her even noticing a thing, the young hunter's arm is violently severed. She looks to the side in absolute shock upon noticing the sudden injury, while her safety tag begins to glow. The emergency recall system activates instantly to rescue the severely injured girl and transport her to the infirmary. Her orange-haired teammate panics at what happened, while the girl with glasses suspects the presence of an intermediate rank. The orange-haired girl tries to locate the hidden enemy in the forest, but is taken by surprise by an attack coming from below. A terrible monster attacks out of nowhere with sharp claws in an extremely devastating strike against the young girl. She lets out a desperate scream of pain as she is hit square by the swift creature's violent blow. Right after, the tag's safety spell activates, and she also vanishes, engulfed in teleportation light. The girl with glasses is left completely alone and trembling, unable to even track the enemy's lightning-fast movements. Seeing the colossal creature rise right before her eyes, she realizes the true danger of facing an intermediate rank. As the monster goes for the finishing blow, Haruto dashes in at crazy speed and uses his sword to sever the creature's arm. The young man lands firmly on the ground, while the intermediate demon's body collapses totally defeated right behind him. The girl with glasses looks back in total shock and disbelief at the sheer speed of that saving intervention. She is left wondering who that warrior is, unable to believe he was capable of defeating the enemy so effortlessly. Haruto turns to look at her in a friendly way. While the girl begins coming up with a theory about his identity, she wonders if he could be the famous prodigy of the Ryudoji family, but is caught off guard seeing Haruto bow his head in apology. Seeing that humble, exaggerated attitude, she figures out she was wrong, but thanks him, saying she really was in big trouble. The boy stays in the same bowed position, sighing in relief for not having done anything wrong, leaving the young girl confused. He raises his head with a gentle smile, saying it was nothing, making the girl with glasses wonder what he was even apologizing for. Quickly, Haruto says goodbye, wishing her good luck on the test, and leaps back into the trees with extreme agility. Haruto jumps from branch to branch, extremely happy to have helped another person, feeling truly alive. He comes up with a plan to chase after the sounds of battle to defeat demons, help those in need, earn points, and get thanked along the way. The young man hears combat noises nearby and immediately heads in that direction with great determination. He starts taking down multiple monsters rapidly, saving several candidates who were in serious trouble in the forest. Many competitors thank him in deep relief for the crucial help, leaving the boy super satisfied with being useful. Haruto feels his heart pounding with emotion, thinking this indescribable feeling is the best thing in the world. He notes that he still hasn't run into a real intermediate demon yet and wonders if today is his lucky day. As a precaution, he decides he will turn around and run without thinking twice if he encounters anything too dangerous. Further ahead, young Master Ryudoji finds himself alone and completely surrounded by a massive horde of monsters, spotting the scene from atop a tree. Haruto panics over the number of enemies and readies himself to jump down and help. He leaps toward the blue-haired guy to offer assistance in fighting off the horde. However, Ryudoji glances at him coldly from the side and warns that the MC is just getting in his way. The prodigy then activates a devastating skill and wipes out all surrounding monsters with a single overwhelming blow. Haruto lands on the ground in total shock from witnessing that absurd level of destructive power-up. Close, Ryudoji turns around calmly with his sword sheathed and sarcastically remarks that the boy seems to be doing fine. The prodigy studies his face carefully and asks if he is the famous Kamikiri Haruto. The boy gets confused and asks how the guy knows him, quickly deducing it must be because of the previous test. In a completely unexpected move, Ryudoji slashes swiftly with his sword, but Haruto manages to block the blow just in time. Shocked by the sudden hostility, the MC demands to know why he attacked out of nowhere in the middle of the exam. With a deeply serious and intimidating glare, the blue-haired young man firmly states that he cannot accept this situation. He commands Haruto to prove his worth and show the strength that earned the approval of the Blade Emperor himself. The prodigy presses his blade with even more intensity, demanding to see the boy's true power. Haruto asks him to stop, arguing that this is no time for candidates to fight each other and that this test is vital for him. Young Master Ryudoji repeats the word with deep contempt, shoving his opponent back with extreme force. The blue-haired young man coldly states that something as trivial and insignificant as a school exam means nothing to him. Next, the prodigy creates distance with a quick leap into the air, preparing to restart the sword duel. However, he realizes in shock that he backed off out of pure instinct upon sensing a monstrous, terrifying presence emanating from Haruto. Meanwhile, Haruto lowers his head with a serious expression and repeats the words spoken by his opponent in a dark tone. He recalls how Akuto was the first person to acknowledge his worth and how this test is the ultimate opportunity of his life. The MC stares at his opponent from a distance and firmly says the test might seem silly to others. Consumed by sudden fury, he shouts with pure resolve that this test is the most important thing in the world to him. Everything picks up as Haruto continues his hunt in the forest, saving multiple people and racking up points. In the monitoring room, Akuta laughs and says, Haruto is interesting for wanting to save people out of his own selfishness. The examiners watch the screen and notice that the classic candidate clash started earlier than usual this year. The pink-haired examiner comments that there are always a few students who end up picking fights with each other. Akuta puts his arm around Kusabi's shoulder and casually says that this year's candidates are exceptional. However, she warns that intermediate demons should be avoided and that the situation could turn worse. Akuta asks if they should prepare as a precaution, and Kusabi seriously replies that it goes without saying. Back in combat, Ryudoji warns that the screams of agony from an intermediate demon attract other monsters. Ignoring the warnings, Haruto charges forward with determination and delivers a heavy strike at his opponent. The rival easily dodges Haruto's attack, which slams into the ground hard, sending a shockwave through the dirt. Ryudoji counterattacks with crazy speed, forcing Haruto to use every bit of his strength just to defend himself. The MC realizes his opponent's lightning-fast attacks resemble the speed level of his clash with Akuta. Ryudoji notices Haruto's style is amateurish, but is impressed to see him defending purely on reflex. Remembering the destroyed statue, the blue-haired guy thinks that simple block can't possibly be all Haruto has to offer. He stares at his opponent with a focused glare and demands to see the boy's true potential. Next, he unleashes a massive blast of blue energy, ordering the MC to show everything he's got. Haruto dodges by jumping backward and shouts annoyed, asking what on earth his opponent wants from him. At that exact moment, a massive horde of monsters suddenly emerges all around the two boys in the forest. Without wasting time, Haruto uses his red sword to slice down the weaker creatures approaching them. He backs up alarmed upon realizing an absurd amount of monsters is charging directly at them. Ryudoji calmly reveals that it's obvious. Since he himself lit incense specifically made to attract demons, Haruto gets furious learning it's his rival's fault and tries to argue that they need to fall back together. The rival ignores the danger and attacks Haruto, who demands to know who he is for acting so recklessly. The blue-haired young man formally introduces himself as Toya Ryudoji while rushing forward at speed. Haruto complains that he didn't actually want to know his real name and says everything his rival does is extreme. The two keep trading blows despite being surrounded by a terrifying number of giant monsters. Even while bickering, both leap and start slicing through the demons trying to attack them at the same time. Toya quickly disengages by leaping over the trees while the MC shouts at him to wait up. The young master stops suddenly and asks Haruto if he also felt a strange sensation in the air. Haruto is confused at first, but is soon cut off as he senses a terrifying pressure drawing near. Toya realizes the situation has become extremely dangerous with the arrival of that crushing presence. He explains that miasma from defeated monsters lingers on site and that an excessive buildup causes severe trouble. The guy reveals in all seriousness that this huge amount of miasma serves as bait for high-rank demons. Haruto finally grasps what miasma is by connecting the term with the suffocating, heavy atmosphere around them. Right before them, a high-rank demon with a pale, intimidating appearance slowly floats into view. The creature releases a devastating wave of purple energy that forces both youths to jump back in alarm. The monster floats gracefully, surrounded by several floating black spheres pulsing with dark energy. Toya studies the opponent carefully and asserts with certainty that its spiritual pressure is overwhelming. Still confused about ranks, Haruto trembles and remarks that this must be an intermediate demon. Toya shouts annoyed, stating it's a high rank, explaining that the intermediate ones were the ones they killed earlier. The blue-haired guy admits to himself that the blame for this dangerous apparition rests entirely on him. He proudly declares the creature is his prey, since it was drawn by him. Ordering Haruto not to butt in, Haruto accepts the warning without complaining, and casually wishes his rival good luck. Toya warns that Haruto will be next after the monster is defeated, and the MC grumbles, wishing for him to lose. The young master wields his sword and prepares to handle that massive mess all on his own. He analyzes the floating opponent from afar, trying to figure out if the black spheres serve as projectiles. The young man questions the speed level and durability of each of those floating spheres. The terrifying high-rank monster decides to make the first move and charges forward at extreme speed. Toya activates his running dragon technique to deliver a swift slash of blue energy against the attack. With surgical precision, he collides his blade directly against one of the opponent's black spheres. Toya leaps into the air to deflect another black sphere fired by the demon with his blade. He feels the heavy impact of the collision and realizes the spheres are hard, but trusts he can manage their speed. Seeing the spheres regenerate right after being sliced, Toya smiles excitedly for an endurance battle. Suddenly, Haruto spots imminent danger and screams desperately for his rival to watch out before he can react. Toya is hit square on his side by a massive blast of purple energy. The young master is sent flying by the sheer force of the mysterious strike that appeared out of thin air. As dust rises, the terrifying high-rank demon continues controlling its floating spheres. Toya tries to understand where the hit came from, as he felt no sound or spiritual energy within his perception range. Spotting purple marks forming on his back, he wonders frustrated if he fell into some trap or curse. Haruto dashes in rapidly and uses his red sword to cut down another sphere about to hit the fallen guy. The MC steps in front of his teammate while the black spheres continue to circle them. He deflects the monster's attack hard, causing the energy to scatter against the forest ground. Toya watches the scene in shock as he deduces he was struck by a completely invisible sphere. He realizes the visible spheres are just distractions and that the demon's true threat is invisible. At that, Toya wonders in amazement how Haruto managed to react and slice an attack that was totally imperceptible. The white-haired boy keeps his glowing red eyes wide open, laser-focused on the hidden threat. He stands firm against the dark mist of the forest, concentrating for the next move. The MC can clearly visualize two streams of purple energy swirling right in front of him in mid-air. This is a special ability Haruto developed entirely on his own back when he possessed zero spiritual energy. In order to survive and protect himself from constant abuse by bullies in the past, the young man got used to meticulously observing every physical threat charging at him. This sharp, constant observation in the face of danger eventually became part of his daily routine. Since a blow from a high-rank demon is lethal, what Haruto felt approaching was the very sensation of death itself. Having already experienced actual death once in the past when he was cruelly struck down, and having faced that exact same end in his fight against Akuda right after being reborn, Haruto's perception skills were elevated to an extremely absurd and refined level. Thanks to that traumatic experience, he can clearly feel the physical approach of death itself. This sensation manifests to him as a dark aura advancing rapidly in his direction. With this heightened perception, the boy readies himself to strike the threat others cannot see. He delivers a precise slash through the air and destroys another one of the high-rank demon's invisible spheres. The floating opponent backs off slightly upon noticing its hidden trick was uncovered by the young hunter. The situation remains extremely dangerous as even more streams of dark energy form around them. Haruto thinks that if the monster escapes, the other candidates will be in grave danger, choosing to fight rather than flee. He motivates himself by remembering there are things in the world he will only be able to save using his own sword. With a laser-focused look, he decides the time to unleash all his power is right now. Toya tells the MC to stop being ridiculous for taking on such an opponent, but asks if he really sees the attacks. The high-ranked demon continues floating, imposing before the two young demon hunters. Toya stares at it, intrigued, and demands to know how he is able to see the monster's invisible projectiles. The guy admits, frustrated, that he himself only realized the invisible sphere existed when he was hit. Haruto responds, confused, that the spheres just look like a blurry smudge, leaving his rival surprised by the silly answer. Suddenly, another massive pack of additional monsters begins creeping out of the forest shadows. Toya realizes, annoyed, that the incense ended up drawing even more demons to the battle site. Even weakened, the prodigy channels his blue energy into his blade to face the fresh horde. He summons his raging dragon strike and announces he will handle clearing the pack of intermediate demons. With a focused look, the guy orders Haruto to be responsible for watching and holding back the leader's invisible spheres. Haruto complains, surprised at the command, and tells the guy not to make solo calls in the middle of combat. Toya insists he needs to clear the area and that Haruto must focus on the spheres since he's the only one who can see them. He sprints toward the horde, thinking the MC won't act recklessly. Knowing the danger of a high rank, Haruto watches the pale monster floating ahead of him and reflects on the instruction he just received. At that very instant, the high-rank demon extends its purple energy tentacles straight toward the MC. Haruto defends as best he can against the attacks, realizing he is the only one capable of doing anything against the invisible spheres. He tries to land a slicing blow, but notices his sword fails to destroy the projectiles completely. He remembers that the manifestation blade only unleashes its full power when he has the true intent to cut his target. With that thought in mind, Haruto locks in his determination and executes a powerful slash to defend himself. However, the high-ranked demon starts generating an even larger amount of black spheres all around. Determined, the MC decides he will eliminate everything in his path all in one go. He leaps and unleashes a giant vertical red slash, attempting to slice through every energy sphere at once. Unfortunately, he ends up getting hit by a powerful counterattack coming from above and crashes to the ground. The boy realizes he can't focus on the invisible spheres in time and that he needs to get close to slice them one by one. However, he notes the projectiles multiply way too fast and that a war of attrition strategy won't work. At that, he considers the risky idea of completely ignoring the spheres to charge directly at the demon. Decided to act with the same boldness as Toya, Haruto pushes off the ground and charges at high speed. He runs and weaves through the storm of dark spheres, concentrating all his spiritual energy. The young hunter leaps toward the enemy's head and shouts confidently upon finding an opening. With a surgical movement of his sword, he manages to slice off part of the demon's head ornament. To Haruto's surprise, his follow-up attack is easily blocked by the opponent's barrier. He realizes too late that the monster used an invisible sphere he failed to detect in time. The MC is hurled with extreme violence against the stone ground by the hidden impact. Severely injured and with blood on his face, he begins to lose consciousness from the heavy hit. Haruto realizes desperately that he won't be able to reach the demon's body as long as that defense stays active. Seeing the situation from afar, Toya halts his combat against the horde and shouts worriedly for his partner. The boy lies completely motionless at the bottom of a crater, bleeding heavily without showing any reaction. In his subconscious mind, Haruto senses the situation has become extremely critical. He feels his own consciousness fading fast as darkness begins to take over. He remembers almost passing away in the past and sadly wonders if this time will be his permanent end. At that moment, the god of calamity appears in his mental world, calling him pathetic for nearly fading out against weak enemies. The deity mocks him for being weak even while possessing the 10 claws, making Haruto complain about his arrogant attitude. The boy shoots back that he didn't receive an instruction manual, but the spirit assures him enemies fall as soon as he decides to cut. Haruto complains that he can't cut what is invisible and demands to know how to deal with the hidden projectiles. The god of calamity explains that his big flaw is focusing only on sensing direct death. The deity advises the boy to keep total focus on the opponent's actual actions and intentions. He tells Haruto he must see absolutely everything the demon creates and manifests on the field. The spirit teaches that any attack fired by the enemy should be treated as a blade pointed at his life. With this valuable advice, a massive torrent of sharp fragments shatters in the boy's mind. Haruto observes everything from above and sarcastically remarks that the deity makes everything sound so easy. However, he gives a subtle smirk and states he finally managed to understand the secret. The spirit orders him to return immediately to the real battle before permanent death actually catches up to him. Back in reality, Haruto slowly stands up from the crater, surrounded by a powerful, terrifying purple aura. With a smooth and spectacular motion, he begins flawlessly slicing through the demon's invisible spheres. The boy wipes the blood off his face and remarks, relieved, that he really thought he was going to perish from that attack. He realizes his mistake was focusing on imminent death instead of predicting the demon's real movements. Haruto focuses even deeper on the enemy's presence, preparing himself for the true counterattack. He advances fearlessly, mentalizing that whatever the opponent fires must be sliced down without hesitation. The boy views the surrounding horde of projectiles as if they were deadly blades aimed directly at him. With unreal focus, he snaps his glowing eyes wide open and manages to see the trajectory of every single attack. A massive dark skull aura rises behind Haruto, preparing to unleash its fury. In a single instant of pure mastery, the MC executes a colossal slash that engulfs the entire field. Activating the ultimate power of the 10 claws, he delivers a devastating strike that cuts the high-ranked demon right in half. Haruto falls to his knees exhausted and whispers that he did it, leaving Toya completely speechless and frozen in shock. With all spheres destroyed and the danger ended, Toya walks slowly over to the fallen boy and calls his name. Haruto feels his body grow extremely heavy, realizing the physical toll of the battle is way worse than he imagined. At that moment, a loud audio announcement echoes through the forest, declaring that the third phase of the exam has finally ended. The loudspeaker commands everyone to cease combat immediately, as the recall teleportation will begin shortly. Toya approaches fallen Haruto and admits with genuine surprise that the boy actually managed to survive that trial. As he begins to teleport away, the rival makes a point to say that this doesn't mean he considers him strong. Still lying on the ground, Haruto whispers back that he couldn't care less and that he doesn't need Toya's approval for anything. In the examiner's room, it is officially decided that the defeat of the high-ranked demon will be credited solely to Haruto. Following traditional rules, candidates who eliminate high-ranked targets automatically receive the maximum score on the test. Akuta mockingly asks if he won the bet, but Kusabi shoots back, saying the boy's overall score is still a failing grade. The Blade Emperor smiles and argues it would be foolish to fail someone capable of soloing a demon of that level. With the principal's decision to pass Haruto in first place, Kusabi accepts his loss and fulfills his bet promise. While Akuta sighs in relief for not hurting his pupil's chances, Kusabi quietly reflects on how dangerous the boy is. The scientist resolves to take full responsibility for eliminating Haruto should he ever become a global threat. Akuta watches him and comments that Kusabi's true role now will be guiding the boy to keep the worst from happening. As he steps out, Kusabi thinks that he truly hopes Haruto Kamikiri manages to stay on the righteous path. Time passes, and the scene shifts to the imposing Togoku Academy building during a beautiful spring afternoon. Wearing his new school uniform with pride, Haruto stands in front of the opening ceremony sign. Inside the Academy's grand auditorium, the welcome ceremony officially begins with the freshman oath. Toya Ryudoji is the one giving the speech on the main stage, as the top representative of the newly admitted students watching from the audience. Haruto remembers that his rival managed to enter the prestigious academy with the highest overall rank. He reflects that just a month ago, he could never have imagined he would be accepted and studying at a place like this. The young man remembers everything changed after meeting Akuta and resolves to improve so he can help as many people as possible. With a heart full of hope, he swears to himself that he will become a legendary demon hunter. However, right in the middle of his heroic thoughts, the white-haired boy suddenly sports a confused expression. Haruto realizes a silly doubt and wonders what exactly a demon hunter actually does on a day-to-day basis. His moment of doubt is cut short when the academy principal starts speaking into the stage microphone. The students whisper impressed, unable to grasp the exact moment the man appeared at the center of the stage. The principal praises the new freshman class and states he feels extremely encouraged by everyone's unlimited potential. With a dramatic, commanding gesture, the man draws his massive weapon and points it at the floor with supreme authority. In that instant, the entire backdrop of the auditorium transforms into a vast, breathtaking outer space domain. The new students stand slack-jawed and amazed as they observe realistic projections of galaxies floating above them. Haruto feels like he is floating in the vacuum of space and wonders if this is the work of a manifestation blade's insane power. The principal delivers a speech stating that hunters risk their lives to protect world peace and that everyone's duty here is monumental. He advises the youths to hone their skills at the academy and to keep stepping forward with confidence in themselves. The man emphasizes with authority that all who gain great strength have a sacred duty to choose their own path. Suddenly, the students start whispering excitedly as they spot a very famous presence projecting onto the stage. Seeing Akuta's image projected on stage, Haruto is stunned and wonders if his mentor was really someone that famous. The mentor's projection explains that it doesn't matter how noble your divine weapon is or how intense your daily training gets. He asserts with seriousness that a hunter's true value is determined solely by the reason that drives him to fight. He advises everyone to find true value in their personal goals, concluding the first lesson of the ceremony. With a charismatic smile, he invites all freshmen to celebrate the official start of their new journeys. A beautiful trail of golden energy slashes through the projected space, creating a spectacular visual effect that dazzles the students. Haruto enjoys himself and shouts surprised as he feels the simulated wind gently pushing him through the air. Suddenly, the space projection dissolves, and Haruto lands sitting on the soft grass of the school courtyard. Looking up, the MC finds Akuta smiling and officially congratulating him on his enrollment. As he stands up, Haruto hears students commenting, amazed that a legendary hunter always shows up for the opening. They celebrate enthusiastically upon realizing this year's special guest was none other than the Blade Emperor himself. Haruto goes into full shock and shouts in disbelief upon discovering his tutor's legendary title. He remembers that title belongs to the absolute strongest warrior of all, the true symbol of that era. The Blade Emperor just looks at Haruto from a distance under the cherry blossoms and gives the boy a knowing wink. Haruto gets outraged over Akuta being the Blade Emperor and complains he should have told him something so huge earlier, though admitting he was slow for not realizing shortly after. The scene transitions to the building for Class 3 of the first-year Academy students inside the classroom. Students chat animatedly and comment that the Blade Emperor's appearance was so epic they almost cried. Haruto walks into the room exhausted from getting lost, finding everything dramatic and complaining that every class has its own building. At that moment, Kusabi arrives right behind him, asking if everyone is already there and telling the whole class to take their seats. He introduces himself as Kusabi, the homeroom teacher for Class 3, and says he will teach Shikigami manipulation, demanding daily focus from everyone. The students start whispering, surprised upon realizing he belongs to the famous Kusabi family of Onmyoji, finding that incredible. A few girls even comment on how handsome the teacher is and wonder if he's single, while he just remains serious and quiet. Kusabi then takes the floor again to explain that everyone's true purpose here at Togoku Academy is to become demon hunters. To achieve that goal once and for all, he warns that students will need to earn official certifications. He highlights that hunters face monsters daily and that this is a dangerous profession capable of taking their lives. Because of that, passing tests in various disciplines like swordsmanship, martial arts, onmyutsu, and shikigami manipulation is required to obtain the credential. Kusabi firmly reinforces that these certifications are mandatory, both to achieve any rank promotion and to graduate from the academy. While other students comment that they already knew all of this, Haruto gets thoughtful as he finally understands how the school system works. The instructor orders everyone to follow him, promising to demonstrate in practice the true meaning of obtaining one of these certifications. He leads the entire class to a large open training field where several black stone pillars stand in a line. Kusabi announces that the test consists of summoning a shikigami and controlling it to shatter that stone column right in front of them. He explains that the test normally requires 6 months of preparation, but that he will grant the certification today to whoever accomplishes the feat under his authority. Some students find the task easy since it's a basic skill they already learned, showing total confidence that they will pass. One of the confident students activates a paper talisman with his spiritual energy, making the paper float while glowing brightly. A creature resembling a stingray emerges from the paper, and the guy smirks, saying he's going to be the first to finish the test. He commands his spiritual creature with a shout to charge at high speed toward one of the black columns. However, the creature's impact produces only a cloud of bluish smoke without causing any actual damage to the structure. As soon as the smoke clears, the stone column stands completely intact without a single scratch on it. The young man stands open-mouthed at his failure, while Kusabi warns that there is no time limit or attempt limit, and that they can keep trying. Other students fail miserably as well, growing frustrated as they try repeatedly or prepare nervously for their turn. A guy with brownish-green hair watches his classmates' failed attempts and mentally concludes they don't stand a chance of passing. He ponders that it would be impossible to pass a Togoku Academy test using only beginner-level basic shikigami techniques. Next, he notices Haruto standing beside him, just staring blankly at his paper talisman without doing a single thing. He asks why Haruto isn't going to try either, and the MC sheepishly confesses he has never summoned a shikigami in his life. The classmate is genuinely shocked, commenting that even regular schools teach that, while Haruto just laughs, unsure of what to say. Undeterred, Haruto offers an awkward smile and humbly asks his new classmate to teach him the basics of how to do it. The boy is a bit surprised by the unusual request, but ends up agreeing to help the MC without much fuss. Meanwhile, the other students continue huffing and puffing, exhausted from failing so much, complaining that the test is way too hard. One of them complains angrily that the stone is so tough that not even his manifestation blade was able to leave a dent in it. Kusabi then explains that a true demon hunter shouldn't fight relying solely on the power of their manifestation blade. He says it is onmyutsu that compensates for a weapon's weaknesses, perfectly complementing combat techniques. He states that mystical arts also demand an extremely high standard and summons a gigantic white tiger with glowing golden markings. With a single quick leap, the formidable beast attacks and shatters all 5 stone columns at once with 0 effort. Kusabi glances sideways at the shocked class and coldly remarks that doing something simple like that should be second nature to them. Facing the general awe of the students, he asks directly if they really thought that just getting into the academy would make them hunters. He says only those who endure until graduation will be hunters, telling them to face hard reality and realize how hard they'll have to push themselves. He adds that 6 different certifications will be required to advance to the next year, advising everyone to use their time wisely. Just as he thinks his duty is to crush the rookie's illusions right off the bat, he is interrupted by a very loud shout of celebration. Kusabi quickly recognizes Haruto's voice and is astonished to see the boy manage to create a tiny pink rabbit on his very first try. The teacher recalls Akuta's request to keep an eye on the boy, making him observe the situation with even closer attention. Haruto ignores the gazes of everyone around him and gets super happy and excited, petting the trembling little bunny he summoned. Kusabi slaps his own forehead, unable to believe that the heir recommended by the legendary Blade Emperor is that goofball. A few nearby students also stand completely bewildered, seeing the fragile rabbit, finding that silly situation hilarious. However, a massive shadow suddenly falls over Haruto, making it clear that the little bunny is nowhere near enough for the test. Kusabi says Haruto still isn't qualified for the exam and tells him to focus on the basics, thinking the boy's relaxed attitude is ruining the lesson. Shortly after, the teacher decides to wrap up activities for the day and tells everyone to get better organized, taking his leave right after Haruto remembers regular classes start the following day. But before that, he knows he needs to figure out a way to memorize that huge campus. Suddenly, his rival, Toya Ryudoji, shows up asking with scorn what that pathetic presentation was, making the MC sigh in exhaustion. Toya complains that it's super rude of Haruto to pull a face of disgust the exact second he sees him arrive. Haruto asks if he doesn't remember attacking him out of nowhere earlier, but the rival just shoots back telling him not to hold a grudge over something so silly. Changing the subject, Toya asks if he is also looking for his dorm location there on the school map. Haruto reflects and comments that he really needs to pick a dorm by the end of the day, leaving the rival completely shocked by the revelation. Toya shouts annoyed, saying that settling housing is basic common sense, unable to believe he hasn't picked a room yet on enrollment day itself. Haruto explains that up until now he slept on the floor of a cramped storage closet, so any place that shields him from wind and rain is already great. Toya insists that for anyone who wishes to become a true demon hunter, maintaining an organized personal environment is fundamental. He points his finger at Haruto's chest and reminds him that, like it or not, he was recommended by the Blade Emperor himself in person. Toya walks off while telling the MC not to keep acting so pathetic around him. Haruto thinks that Akuta really is the hunter at the top of the world, but confesses to himself that the magnitude of his mentor still hasn't fully sunk in, hidden behind a nearby wall. Young Inari Itsuna watches Haruto in shock, unable to believe what he just overheard. He recalls that earlier, he was frantically trying to build a good relationship with Toya Ryudoji to climb the social ladder. However, he is amazed to discover that out of everyone there, it was actually Haruto who possessed the official recommendation from the legendary Blade Emperor Inari. Deduces Haruto's potential must be gigantic to be recommended even without knowing how to summon a Shikigami. Realizing almost nobody knows about this, he quietly celebrates, thinking it's his destiny, because getting on Haruto's good side will guarantee him a glorious career as a hunter. Haruto decides to go look for a dorm room first, but is suddenly cut short by someone calling out loudly for him right behind. The guy approaches all smiles and formally introduces himself as Inari Itsuna. Leaving Haruto surprised to recognize him from the earlier test, Inari says he figured he might be having trouble with things other than summoning a Shikigami, and Haruto cheers up, calling him a lifesaver. The new classmate proposes they become great friends since they are in the same class, and Haruto happily accepts the greeting, saying it's a pleasure. Haruto gets emotional, realizing he finally made a true friend. While Inari celebrates Solo for having made an excellent first impression, the MC reveals he was actually struggling to choose a dorm, and Inari comments that deep down there isn't much difference between them. At that moment, Haruto looks at his phone and mentions he got a text from Akuta, leaving Inari completely shocked all over again. In the text, Akuta asks if he has decided on a room yet and strongly recommends he go live at the Tsukumo dorm, even sending a photo of himself at the location. Upon seeing the message recommending the place, Inari stands dumbfounded, confirming it really is the Blade Emperor, and wonders how much that man likes Haruto. Haruto decides to go check out the place once and for all, and Inari eagerly agrees, saying he definitely should go since he has Akuta's backing, deciding to tag along as they walk around looking for the site. The two are suddenly interrupted by a desperate scream echoing right near them. One of the school students comes running by frantic, crying in terror over something terrible that seems to be right behind him. Haruto and Inari watch the scene confused, completely clueless and wondering in fear what actually happened to leave the guy in that state. Suddenly, a giant bottle of sake crashes down right in front of them with a loud thud, accompanied by a voice asking if there were any more students left there. A muscular red-haired woman appears sitting and drinking, commenting with a provocative smile that another weakling seems to have popped up. Haruto approaches and asks who she is, to which the woman casually replies that she is the dorm caretaker. The boy finally notices the massive brick building behind her and admits he hadn't even noticed the building because it was completely covered in vines. Haruto explains that they came there because the dorm was recommended, making Inari panic as he realizes he's now included in the middle of all this. The caretaker finds the story interesting and quickly deduces Haruto must be the boy Akuta had mentioned to her earlier. Inari panics in thought upon noticing she called the legendary Blade Emperor just by his name, without using any honorifics or respect. Bluntly, she commands the two to show off a funny party trick. Leaving both thoroughly confused by that senseless demand, she warns that she owns the place and decides who gets in, demanding they show something that impresses her, while Inari wonders if it's just a drunk challenge. She places her hand on the bottle and chillingly warns them about what might happen if whatever they decide to show turns out boring. The woman snaps the glass bottleneck with her bare hands with zero effort and calmly warns that what she just said is not a threat. She then crushes the whole bottle all at once and asserts with a smile that she is dead serious about what she promised to do to them if they fail. Haruto finally realizes why the guy from earlier was running away terrified, while Inari desperately concludes that woman is totally nuts. Inari whispers nervously, asking what he plans to do, suggesting maybe it's better to fall back, while Haruto just stays thoughtful. Haruto ponders that if Akuta pointed out the place, it must be worth it, and naively concludes that the school infirmary can easily fix a broken bone. With a confident smile, Haruto says let's do it, while Inari screams terrified, saying breaking a bone is no small matter. Unluckily for everyone, the caretaker points directly at Inari and decides they are starting the challenge with him, leaving the guy in absolute panic. She begins popping her knuckles intimidatingly and asks if he's going to do his performance or not, while the guy just shakes, clueless on what to do. Inari grumbles, annoyed, and says that no matter what happens from here on out, nobody better blame him for the outcome. Next, he starts chopping cabbages at incredible speed and with surgical precision that would make anyone jealous. Wearing an apron and a chef's bandana, the young man starts sautéing ingredients in a frying pan with impressive flames. Inari announces the food is ready and presents a marvelous feast full of delicious, beautifully plated dishes. The caretaker tries one of the snacks using chopsticks and stands completely speechless at the incredible flavor of that food. Inari says cockily that if it's to make finger food to go with her drinks, he can cook all day long with zero issues. Facing such a spectacular dish, the woman instantly declares he passed the test, making the boy celebrate relieved. The woman warns Haruto is next and asks what he knows how to do, and the MC reflects that the only thing he knows how to do well is slice things. Hearing this, the caretaker leans in close to his face and dares him to show what he is truly capable of doing with a blade. With supernatural agility, the woman leaps high and lands lightly on one of the branches of the large cherry tree in the courtyard. She holds a single flower petal between her fingers, which begins to glow intensely with bright blue magical energy from Onmutsu. She explains she is going to drop that magic-infused petal and warns that if he manages to cut it before it touches the ground, he passes. Inari finds that demand absurd and unfair, but Haruto readily accepts the challenge, leaving his friend incredulous at his confidence. The woman drops the petal and warns the test has begun, causing the small bluish object to start its rapid descent toward the dirt. As the petal falls, the caretaker remembers Akuta's request to take good care of Haruto when he arrived at the Tsukumo dorm. She thinks to herself that when a living legend like Akuta personally asks to look after someone, things get a whole lot different. Her old friend's request actually only makes her want to make things as tough as possible for the rookie MC. In that same instant, Haruto moves in the blink of an eye and executes an absurdly fast slash amidst a shower of cherry blossoms. The caretaker watches the cut, thinking that whoever claims their specialty is slicing had better at least be able to handle a test of this level. The boy completes the movement with mastery and sheathes his divine blade with extreme precision and elegance. He calmly extends his arm under the tree and manages to catch something in midair well before it touches the flower-covered ground. Haruto celebrates happily, saying he got it, leaving Inari wide-mouthed as he admits the speed was so crazy he couldn't see a thing. Haruto holds out his hand smiling and shows half of a perfectly sliced petal, leaving his friend in disbelief that he actually cut it and caught the piece. While the MC casually comments that the other half must have fallen somewhere nearby, the woman stares at him in complete silence. She recognizes the genius of the feat, knowing that petal was fully protected by a dense, invisible barrier of spiritual energy. She reflects that being able to see and cut such a tiny object in freefall requires extraordinary visual perception and reflexes. The most impressive detail of all is that even in the middle of that dense shower of falling flowers, not a single other surrounding petal was even touched. Passing the boy with a smile, she thinks his way of overcoming absurd challenges reminds her a lot of Akuta when he was just a student. She knows that with such talent and potential, extremely wild days packed with trials definitely await these new boys in the future. Haruto wakes up startled by the blaring alarm clock in the morning, with a strange piece of advice whispered in his dream still echoing in his mind. The scene shows the beautiful sunny day illuminating the vine-covered brick facade of the Tsukumo dorm. The MC steps out yawning from his room in dark blue pajamas and comes across the start of morning activity in the hallway. Arriving in the kitchen, he finds Inari already up super early and serving breakfast with a rather exhausted expression. Haruto asks why he's wearing that outfit, and the boy replies dead tired that the caretaker forced him to help in the kitchen since dawn. He questions where the other dorm residents are, and the caretaker warns everyone must still be sleeping, telling him to eat first. Facing a beautiful traditional meal with grilled fish, miso soup, and rice, Haruto excitedly thanks for the food. While the MC happily remarks how great it is to eat with company, Inari slumps face down onto the table from pure exhaustion. Haruto looks at his friend lying right beside him and mentions there's something important he'd like to ask him. He questions if Inari knows if there's any way or technique to talk directly with the deity inside one's manifestation blade. The MC explains that on the very first day he got his weapon, he managed to enter his mental world and talk to it. He recounts that the deity said the connection was too weak and vanished, making Inari comment shocked that talking to a sword god right away is super rare. The caretaker approaches from behind and explains that multiple complex stages exist before anyone can fully communicate with their blade. She warns there is a professor at the academy obsessed with blades named Urashizaya, who would be more than happy to answer the boy's questions. With that valuable tip, Haruto decides the best move is to look for this blade studies professor right after class ends. A bit later, the school day officially begins with the first session focused on physical enhancement training. In the gym, students run through an obstacle course at high speed, leaping across platforms under increased gravity. A girl with pink hair tied up in buns comments that the physical demand for a demon hunter is absurd, telling everyone not to give up. Inari complains it's easy to talk, as he's struggling hard just to keep his balance on the moving platforms. He pushes himself to the absolute limit, using all his built-up spiritual energy just to handle the extra weight placed on his wristbands. While the majority still suffers on the course, Haruto breezes through with extreme ease and crosses the finish line in spectacular fashion. The pink-haired girl acknowledges his time was good, but bluntly points out he is wasting way too much movement while running. She explains he's just using his raw spiritual strength to offset his own mistakes, and warns him that if he keeps this up, he'll stop improving. Haruto lets out a tired chuckle in response, leaving the girl confused about why he's finding humor in that moment of exhaustion. He explains with a smile that he's happy because here at Togoku Academy, he is finally being treated and corrected like a regular student. She reveals she looked over his record and knows nobody ever taught him properly, advising the boy to soak up as much knowledge as possible at school. Right after, she snaps back to her strict stance and shouts that the others are way too slow, ordering the entire class to run 10 more laps on the course. Later, the scene shifts to the building where afternoon classes take place, focused entirely on blade studies. Professor Urushizaya starts the class explaining on the chalkboard that the study of blades is considered by many as a second philosophy of life. As the professor lectures on the existence of the world of gods and spirits, Inari struggles against insane sleepiness, almost passing out on his desk. He laments that after going through that terrible military-grade physical training, having to listen to that monotonous lecture is making his eyelids heavy as lead. Looking to the side, Inari stands perplexed, seeing Haruto completely wide awake, taking notes with extreme dedication and a sparkle in his eyes. Haruto thinks that this is a world he was never able to be part of before, knowing everyone else spent their whole lives studying it. Noticing his new friend's genuine drive, Inari smirks and thinks that Haruto will definitely do amazing on his new journey. He soon starts daydreaming that they'll be a great duo and that they'll start their own elite team of demon hunters in the future. As soon as class finally wraps up for the day, Haruto hurries over and calls out loudly for Professor Urushizaya before he leaves the room. Haruto explains he wants to clear up doubts about the entity living inside his blade, and the professor invites him to talk about the sword god on the way. The professor gets extremely hyped and fascinated by the MC's initial story regarding his brief mental contact. He starts breaking into a jog out of sheer excitement, showering Haruto with frantic questions about the details of that spiritual contact. Flustering the boy, Urushizaya keeps asking about the entity's appearance, size, and even smell, making Inari comment shocked at how pumped the professor is. The professor confirms if the sword god told him to draw out the hidden power, and upon confirmation, smiles, saying the situation turned out to be perfect. He confesses with an ambitious look that he also intended to take advantage of that unique opportunity to fully satisfy his own academic curiosity. He explains that the best way to get used to the blade and strengthen the weakened connection to talk to it is to practice endlessly. He asserts he knows the perfect place for that and tells the boys to follow him to the facilities of a massive special training arena. He introduces them to the blade discipline practice room, revealing that the site features reinforced spiritual barriers capable of handling the test. The professor points to a massive mechanical wooden puppet standing right ahead of them and reveals it's the actual reason he brought them there. He explains that it is copy model number 7, a mechanical training dummy built using the finest known techniques of onmyotsu. He demonstrates a slot on the back of the puppet and tells the MC to insert his manifestation blade inside, and Haruto obeys. As soon as the boy inserts his katana into the indicated slot, the mechanical dummy suddenly begins emitting a heavy aura of red energy. Haruto gets startled as he feels all his stored spiritual energy getting rapidly sucked and drained from his body into the puppet. Urushizaya explains, the dummy analyzes the energy and transforms into an enemy with the exact same power level as the user, leaving Inari slack-jawed. He adds with a smirk that defeating this puppet in combat also serves as the official test to gain the blade certification. The professor tells Haruto to fight the puppet right away to discover its potential, and the boy nervously agrees as he prepares to fight. Inari asks if it's right to do the exam so abruptly, but the professor replies that since he is the instructor in charge there, it's totally fine. He recalls that Haruto placed first in the entrance exams and even defeated a high-rank demon, proving he's already strong enough for the test. Inari falls into complete shock, realizing that if that's actually true, it means Haruto is in reality even stronger than Toya himself. He quietly confesses he just wants to see up close and study that legendary weapon, making Inari yell annoyed that this was his true motive all along. Urushizaya thinks to himself that he's dying to discover what kind of mystery is hidden inside the blade chosen and endorsed by the legendary emperor. The professor notices the guy's reaction and asks if he isn't curious too, leaving Inari in a panic, thinking he uncovered his self-interest plan. The professor locks his eyes on the dummy, eagerly hoping the god dwelling inside the weapon likes the mechanical opponent he prepared right there. The magical barrier around the location fully activates, sealing the entire area to ensure zero spiritual energy leaks outside. Suddenly, the mechanical wooden dummy begins vibrating intensely, unleashing an absurd amount of black and purple smoke in all directions. A massive pillar of dark, destructive energy erupts from the mechanical puppet, generating a shockwave that startles everyone in the room. The force of the energy blast hurls Haruto backward brutally, causing him to slide hard across the polished stone floor of the training arena. The terrifying god of calamity, Magatsukami, grumbles from within the dark energy, commenting that this wooden vessel is fragile, yet quite useful. Looking up amid the dust, Haruto stands completely perplexed, facing the terrifying transformation that just took place right before him. The terrifying god of calamity takes complete control of the puppet's wooden body, manifesting its evil, monstrous aura across the entire arena. The professor stands extremely perplexed, realizing the deity analyzed the puppet's mechanics and possessed it entirely, while Inari screams, confused by everything, sensing that massive, crushing evil aura cover the entire room. Haruto readies himself for combat, knowing exactly whose presence that is. Staring into the monster's terrifying, glowing eyes through the smoke, the MC confirms horrified that his own god of calamity has awakened. Watching the scene from afar, Inari goes into total panic, asking himself terrified if that scary creature is what lives inside Haruto's weapon. Magatsukami notices there are people in the way, getting in the middle. Inari and Professor Urushizaya stand completely terrified by the situation. Without wasting time, the creature lunges in an extremely fast attack. The strike slices through the air with violent and frightening force. The violent attack creates a massive curtain of dust and destruction across the arena. Haruto screams, desperate upon seeing Inari and the professor thrown to the ground injured. He asks horrified what the creature did, but the monster just tells him to shut his mouth. The god of calamity says Haruto is way too weak and won't get anywhere if he almost perishes all the time. The entity warns it will teach the young man how to use true power using his own body. The monster then readies itself and warns him not to get distracted during combat. Haruto barely dodges as the floor gets split down the middle by a devastating attack. Magatsukami pops up right behind him and asks how someone challenging an opponent dares to hesitate. Next, the creature moves like lightning and causes another violent explosion. The monster mocks him, saying he isn't holding anything back, but Haruto replies he still has plenty left. Magatsukami examines the puppet's arm and comments that this wooden body is actually pretty useful. He notices the puppet is fragile and thinks that if the fight drags on, it will destroy itself. The monster says he can clearly read those cowardly thoughts written all over the young man's face. With that, the creature charges in, landing a flurry of sequential strikes against him. One of the attacks grazes past the body of unconscious Inari, almost taking his life. The god of calamity smirks sadistically and warns that next time he will hit his friend dead center. Seeing this, Haruto gets furious and curses at his opponent with hatred in his eyes. He screams that his goal is to help and tells the monster not to drag other people into this, but the villain replies that he was the one who put them there. The demon warns he has no time to waste, and that those two over there will perish if Haruto doesn't manage to hit him soon, with no other choice. Haruto unleashes all his energy and screams enraged for the monster not to mess with him. The young man rushes forward furiously and delivers a direct sword slash against his opponent. He is surprised to see a barrier protecting his opponent and decides to concentrate even more spiritual energy into his sword. But the monster says he is way too slow and that no real enemy would wait for such a slow wind-up. The creature fires a sharp purple cutting attack and tells the young man to use his brain. To figure out a better way to fight, Haruto manages to deflect the hit but gets caught off guard by a second hidden attack coming right behind it. The impact is brutal and hurls the MC against the arena wall with extreme violence. He realizes his legendary technique requires spiritual energy to perfectly wrap around the blade, which still isn't happening. He notes he needs a long charging time to build up enough energy to cut through that impenetrable defense. The god of calamity coldly ponders if it would be better to eliminate the boy right now to force him to truly awaken. Thinking of Inari, Haruto remembers he is his very first true friend and becomes even more determined. But the creature scoffs at his feelings and warns that this kind of talk only motivates the enemy even more. Desperate upon seeing his opponent move toward his injured allies, Haruto screams, begging him to stop. The young man leaps fast and uses his own body to shield the two from an impending attack. The monster taunts him, saying losing that friend will leave the boy's life empty, miserable, and completely lonely. He continues saying that the guilt of being powerless would make Haruto carry eternal regret for the rest of his days. The MC grinds his teeth in pure rage, realizing the monster is cruelly playing with him. However, the young man notices something different about his own sword in this moment of extreme tension. He remembers he managed to slice the demon's previous attack, even without having concentrated much spiritual energy. Haruto begins frantically questioning himself about what exactly was different in that split second. The entity warns that one can only protect someone while still breathing and dares him to rush in and attack. Haruto replies he didn't need advice and warns he will force his own path open. He charges with everything and strikes with extreme precision against the magical barrier protecting his opponent, but the demon just blocks effortlessly and comments that his attack was way too weak. Next, the monster tells the boy to truly lock in if he genuinely wants to overcome him. A massive shock occurs as the creature delivers an extremely heavy, dark blow against the young man. A colossal explosion of purple and black energy consumes the entire arena, leaving Haruto's fate uncertain. Haruto stands perplexed, unable to understand how the monster uses such devastating attacks with such simple, fast movements. The voice in his mind alerts him that he is just trying to compensate for everything with brute force, wasting spiritual energy for nothing. He realizes he needs to eliminate this waste and focus entirely on proper posture and controlling his movements. The young man begins focusing on a continuous flow of energy instead of just pooling power all at once. With this new realization, he executes a swift, extremely precise movement in the arena. Magatsukami observes the change in Haruto's stance as he advances once more without hesitation. The god of calamity gets surprised and decides to test if that previous strike was just pure luck or not. The monster readies himself to attack again, wanting to see how Haruto will react this time. He fires a devastating attack that shatters the floor toward the young man. While dodging easily, Haruto truly grasps that he didn't need to keep gathering static energy. He makes an analogy with stagnant water that rots, while a moving waterfall can smash giant rocks. The young man understands spiritual energy must circulate freely and concentrate at the exact point of impact required. Focused on the flow of his own energy, he advances toward his terrifying opponent with total lock-in. Haruto guides his spiritual force through his core, passing through his back, shoulders, and arms down to his hands. Energy glows intensely at his fingertips as he firmly grips the hilt of his sword. At that moment, he truly activates his manifestation blade with an absurd release of energy. Facing enormous danger, the god of calamity swiftly summons a triple barrier to protect himself. With a fierce, focused glare, Haruto executes his decisive strike without hesitating for a single second. He delivers his powerful Claws of Calamity technique directly against the enemy's defense. The overwhelming strike slashes through the 3 protective barriers and hits the possessed puppet with full force. Haruto stands surprised, realizing he managed to destroy that extremely tough barrier all in one go. The creature falls to the ground destroyed and praises the boy, explaining that concentrating energy into a single point is the foundation of reinforcement. The monster smirks and says he finally met the conditions to draw out the true value of his blade. Looking at his weapon, Haruto gets confused and startled, seeing his manifestation blade vibrating and glowing intensely. Suddenly, the scenery around shifts in a flash of light, and the god of calamity complains about how much trouble Haruto is. The young man realizes he was transported to his own mental world, where he comes face to face with Magatsukami's giant eye. The deity comments that the young man finally managed to reach there on his own and says he can now reveal his true objective. He introduces himself as Muten and reveals he came to the human world in search of a man who possesses a specific manifestation blade. Muten describes the target as someone wielding a manifestation sword with a translucent blade as clear as ice. Curious about this revelation, Haruto asks the deity why he is specifically searching for this man. He stands in shock upon hearing he must eliminate this person, but Muten warns that this man could also become a major enemy of his. Muten says that if Haruto forgives the man's actions after discovering his true nature, he won't have to eliminate him, though he doubts it. The young man accepts the deal and says he will at least look for him, but makes a very important demand in exchange for this favor. He firmly and angrily demands that the entity never drag in or hurt the people around him ever again. Muten accepts the deal and says Haruto will need to get way stronger to manage to protect everything he holds precious. The divine voice warns that this dangerous fate is the price the young man must pay for getting involved with an entity. Like him, Haruto wakes up back in the practice room and silently stares at the broken wooden puppet debris on the floor. Suddenly, Professor Urushizaya appears recovered and analyzes the boy, leaving him confused if the deity actually listened to reason. The professor calmly explains that sword gods always seek dialogue, so creating that opportunity was his duty. He quietly reflects on how the god of calamity managed to take over and control the puppet's body so freely. He admits the residual energy was so sinister, he would have been forced to fight for real, were it not just a practice dummy. Haruto sadly confesses he feels guilty for ending up hurting Inari, who was his very first true friend at the academy. The master comforts the boy, saying he did great and assuring him Inari will definitely understand everything that happened there. Meanwhile, mysterious forces move in the shadows, and the professor internally hopes his worst bad feelings don't come true. He looks thoughtfully out the hallway window of the academy, feeling a slight unease in the air regarding the future awaiting them. Urashizaya senses the gears of fate have begun to turn, while Haruto carefully helps Inari stand up from the floor. A dark atmosphere seems to linger over the world recently, indicating that something massive and inevitable has already been set in motion. Sometime later, regular classes resume at the academy, and students gather in the classroom to study. Inari approaches Haruto discreetly and whispers, asking what ended up happening with his certification test. Haruto reveals he passed, but explains the official approval is pending until he finishes writing the final report. Inari comments amazed that Haruto basically already passed the test and finds that incredible. Haruto apologizes for dragging him into trouble, but Inari tells him not to worry, because that's what friends are for. Touched by his friend's kind words, the young man just smiles and thanks him from the bottom of his heart. Haruto is moved by the friendship, while Inari thinks he hit the jackpot by making him feel indebted after just passing out. The demonology professor informs the class that true practical training starts tomorrow, but today they will just do a simulation. He commands the students to form trios and cooperate with each other, reminding them that teammates should be people of absolute trust. Inari wonders who the third member of their group will be, and Haruto admits he doesn't know anyone else in the room besides Inari. They watch the other students quickly forming their teams and wonder what they should do now. A purple-haired girl quietly approaches their desk and timidly speaks up. She timidly asks if there is still an open spot in their group, and Haruto accepts immediately, inviting her to join the team. The trio heads to the special training building, where an intermediate rank demon and several shikigami were released for the test. The primary goal of all participating teams is to defeat the invading monsters and secure the safety of the facility. The start signal finally rings, and Team 8 officially begins advancing through the dark interior of the building. Inari comments that team training seems fun, and playfully warns Haruto not to defeat all the demons by himself. The MC smiles back and replies that he knows, showing he is relying heavily on Funo's help for the mission. Funo smiles in a friendly way and timidly thanks him for the trust placed in her by her teammate. Inari asks what her combat specialty is, and Funo reveals she is an attacker type focused on the fire attribute. However, she confesses she is terrible at fighting solo, so Inari suggests they move forward together to maintain safety. Inari then asks Haruto to take the lead and scout the area, which the platinum-haired boy readily accepts. Inari tries to strike a leader pose to impress the girl, but she gets startled seeing the first demons suddenly popping up. Haruto notices enemies have started appearing in bulk and decides to run up the stairs to check the upper floor. Inari pretends to be outraged by his friend's departure, but deep down prefers that others don't see just how broken Haruto really is. Inari says he will clear the first floor and asks for support from the purple-haired girl, who hesitantly and nervously agrees. He grips his sword with determination and channels intense flames through the blade to launch his attack against the monsters. Inari executes a devastating fire technique, generating a flaming slash that incinerates surrounding enemies all at once. However, the fire comes out way too strong, and he ends up burning himself by accident, screaming frantically to himself to dial down the power. Funo apologizes for losing control of the element and warns more demons are approaching, deciding to boost his speed with magic. Under the speed spell effect, Inari gets flung at high speed from side to side in an uncontrollable manner. Unable to brake due to excessive speed, he ends up slamming face first into the wall with extreme force. As the young man groans in pain on the floor, Funo gets worried, and he concludes that using speed magic in tight spaces is terrible. Super embarrassed by the major mistake, the girl apologizes and says she will switch tactics to provide cover with attack spells. She conjures a strong green wind spell to try and disperse the demons continuing to advance through the room. The violent attack grazes right past Inari's own head, making him gulp hard upon realizing the impending danger of getting hit. She is already starting to prep another potent spell, and Inari screams panicked, begging her to stop and take a breather. Sweating cold and suspicious of the situation, he starts thinking her dangerous mistakes are being made on purpose. Off in the distance, the purple-haired girl stands surrounded by a mysterious and suspicious glowing green smoke. She gives an extremely sinister smile and whispers to herself that faking an accident is way harder than she imagined. Sensing the drastic shift in attitude, Inari assumes a serious stance and furiously asks what she is really planning. She replies with scorn, saying she has absolutely nothing against him and didn't even bother to learn his name. Funo sadistically asks him to just sleep for a few days so she can have Haruto all to herself during the next day's training. Without wasting another moment, she fires a sharp wind attack called Wind Needle directly at the olive-haired guy. He dodges the blow and realizes terrified that her obsession with Haruto is completely out of the ordinary, calling her stark raving mad. Either way, knowing he's facing a real enemy, Inari takes position and resolves that he needs to strike back in kind. He decides he won't back down and advances with his flaming blade to defeat his opponent once and for all. Inari realizes her wind serves only to make his fire even stronger and asks who is actually going to walk out hurt. He thinks to himself that she is just a support mage, and that his show of firepower must have crushed her courage. He cockily tells her to stay quiet while summoning blue spiritual energy serpents around himself. However, he is suddenly caught off guard by a massive flood of water summoned by the mysterious opponent. The young man ends up completely drenched and sprawled on the wet floor, unable to react after the sudden hit. She coldly reveals that water douses fire, and that if basic attributes aren't enough, she will use her mastery over Onmudu. Inari realizes the situation is dire, and wonders if the girl is way stronger using magic than with her own sword. With a sadistic, victorious look, Funo declares with full certainty that combat here is already completely over for him. She conjures a powerful rain of water serpents, making the guy shout, panicked, saying that isn't fair. Suddenly, a massive thud echoes, and the room ceiling begins collapsing right on top of them, surprising the purple-haired girl. A giant wooden creature gets crushed by ceiling debris, and Haruto suddenly pops up standing atop the slain monster. Inari feels extremely relieved upon seeing his friend and thinks that together they will definitely manage to handle the situation. The MC steps down off the monster casually, while Inari, still groggy on the floor, tries to warn him of the danger regarding the girl. However, Funo instantly shifts her demeanor and plays innocent, happily thanking Haruto for saving her again. Haruto gets confused by the gratitude and suddenly starts remembering where he had met her previously. He recalls that they met during the third entrance exam, when he helped her get rid of a demon. She celebrates happily that he remembers her, and the boy admits her look changed so much it was hard to recognize her. The young girl timidly confesses she put in a ton of effort to change her appearance on purpose, just to impress the MC. She asks cutely if she looks pretty, and Haruto, flustered and awkward, politely replies that she does, completely ignored and furious with all that fake act of hers. Inari approaches from behind, wanting to demand answers. Funo clings to Haruto and plays shy, apologizing and inventing an excuse that her support spell accidentally failed. She praises his strength for defeating the area boss and pulls him outside, leaving drenched, outraged Inari behind. The guy concludes dejectedly and traumatized that they ended up teaming up with a true dangerous, obsessed psychopath. Funo happily suggests they go report the mission's success, and Inari just silently laments having to put up with the girl. Later that night, lights turn on at the Tsukumo dorm after the long, grueling day of practical testing at the academy. In the housing hallway, Inari complains of extreme fatigue, and Haruto, not understanding his friend's pain, asks if there was any problem. Inari starts bringing up Funo's suspicious attitude, resolved to warn his roommate about the danger that girl represents. Suddenly, Funo herself quietly appears right between the two and asks with a smile what they are talking about regarding her. Inari jumps in fright and asks what she's doing there, panicking upon discovering she also lives at Tsukumo dorm. He realizes that's no coincidence, and a flashback shows the girl spying on the group during the dorm entrance exam. Inari tries to shout surprised, but the girl moves fast and covers his mouth with her hand to prevent him from revealing any secrets. She whispers in an extremely threatening, sadistic manner, warning the guy about the consequences should he dare tell Haruto anything. Haruto looks at the two super confused and asks if there's anything wrong going on there, while Inari shakes in pure terror beside her. Inari tries to cover up the tension by suggesting they exchange phone contacts, an idea Funo happily supports. Leaving Haruto surprised, Haruto happily accepts, thinking emotionally that he never imagined the day would come when he'd exchange contacts with real friends. He excitedly says he's looking forward to everyone working together again on the next day's practical mission. While Haruto naively thinks the two became good friends, they trade whispers and threats right behind his back. The next day, the class gathers in front of an abandoned hospital filled with sinister energy to begin extermination training. The instructor explains they will face real monsters and reveals they invited a professional demon hunter to provide support. The professor introduces the special guest as Yuma Ozuchi, who greets the students with a relaxed, friendly smile on his face. The students get extremely hyped and surprised to recognize the famous warrior standing there before the whole class. Haruto asks, confused, if the man is really that famous, leaving Inari bewildered that he doesn't know an extermination living legend. Inari explains that Ozuchi is an elite hunter who held the highest kill record the previous year, leaving the hero impressed. Suddenly, the hunter pops up unexpectedly right behind them in the blink of an eye, startling the two with his crazy speed. He drapes his arms over the boy's shoulders and humbly comments that having many kills just means he faced weak enemies. Impressed by the warrior's stealthy approach, Inari gulps hard, and the man asks everyone to maintain focus from here on out. Instructor Kusabi resumes combat instructions seriously and commands the students to pay maximum attention to what he says. Ozuchi whispers in Haruto's ear, praising his reflexes, noting the boy was the only one able to keep up with his swift movements. Kusabi warns that teams will be strategically split by specific sectors and floors of the massive abandoned hospital. The goal of practical training is to sweep the area and eliminate absolutely any demon they encounter in their respective sectors. The hunter jokes, saying whoever is meant to pass away will pass away regardless, getting an immediate scolding from the strict instructor to pump them up. Ozuchi promises to pay for a grilled meat feast for the best team, leaving the professor even more annoyed. Hearing the word meat, Haruto starts drooling with hunger instantly, making Inari notice his friend was hooked immediately by the offer. Haruto's group is assigned to clear the upper floors of the West Wing, and everyone prepares to give their absolute best on the test. Upon stepping inside, the MC senses that the suffocating, dark aura all around them became infinitely stronger and more dangerous. Suddenly, a small purple demon mysteriously pops up right on top of his head, completely startling the platinum-haired boy. Haruto gets a huge fright and asks where that little creature came from, and Muten replies he caught the scent of a demon and decided to check it out. Muten warns that someone is creating an artificial naraka outside, and Haruto wonders if the person responsible for that could be Instructor Kusabi. Haruto gets confused and asks if Naraka isn't just where demons originate, wanting to know how they manage to enter the human world. Muten gets amazed and mocks Haruto for having lived so long without knowing that, leaving the boy annoyed to the point of telling his partner to shut up. Muten explains that the miasma generated by humans' daily activities ends up becoming a sort of vessel to summon demons to our world. He continues saying that the area where this miasma gets heavily concentrated is called a naraka, where stronger monsters in larger quantities usually appear. At that moment, Muten tells Haruto to look out the window to see what is happening outside the building. Haruto spots a glowing barrier, and Muten confirms it is a protective ward used specifically to control and regulate the region's miasma. His partner explains that it acts like a valve to purposely draw weaker demons, forcing them to consume the local miasma. Haruto understands the plan is to relieve the buildup of bad energy, and praises Muten's knowledge, who cockily replies that it's obvious. Meanwhile, Ozuchi is completely lost in the hospital hallway, trying to guess if he's in the west, north, or south wing of the building. He decides to check a map to be sure of the path, while down below, students fight frantically against a mid-rank demon that appeared. The elite hunter just watches from afar as the student team manages to defeat the creature after a violent, bloody fight. He comments that their action was pretty reckless, advising the youths to expand their field of vision if they want to survive for long in this profession. The students accept the advice somewhat embarrassed and politely reply that they understood the experienced hunter's message. Up on the roof, Instructor Kusabi uses his mystical skills to control small, floating spiritual papers known as Shikigami Ozuchi, suddenly appears beside him and suggests that instead of just watching everything using ranged techniques, he should offer some moral support to the students. Kusabi shoots back, saying a true professional needs to maintain a broad perspective on the situation, referring to the ideal mindset for combat. Then, Ozuchi asks since when Kusabi started teaching demonology classes and questions what happened to the lead professor, Mr. Maneki. Kusabi explains his colleague wasn't feeling very well and reveals that the school principal himself personally asked him to cover for him that day. In that morning's conversation, Kusabi said he didn't mind covering his colleague's class, but questioned the principal on why he picked him specifically. The academy principal sips his drink thoughtfully, trying to find the best way to explain his decision to the professor. The principal begins telling a curious story about the day he spotted 3 small sparrows lined up perfectly on the window. That strange sight remained etched in his mind for some reason, but at the time he decided to ignore the bad feeling that something was out of place. Tadamitsu laments that on that exact same afternoon, he ended up losing 3 friends on a mission that could have been a success had he paid attention. Ever since, he became extremely sensitive to any everyday anomaly, deciding to entrust test supervision to the most capable professor. He says it would be great if nothing happened and that they should just laugh at his old man paranoia, causing Ozuchi to finally grasp the situation. The hunter thinks about how incredible the Konami brothers are. Knowing he can't ignore an intuition coming straight from the powerful academy principal Kusabi, quietly reflects on Class 3, noting that this specific class already possesses concerning and mysterious elements in its own right. He thinks about the boy the Blade Emperor took in, commenting that despite the boy's dark style, he has good friends and doesn't seem like he will stray. Kusabi was about to comment that the boy looks nothing like that person from the past, but is cut short by Ozuchi's sudden shout calling his name. Ozuchi asks him not to get worked up, advising his colleague not to let past feelings get in the way and to focus on who the students are in the present. Meanwhile, Haruto runs frantic down the hallway and shouts to alert his teammates about a mid-rank demon that is advancing. A giant red beast claw emerges from the ceiling, coming down dangerously toward Funo and Inari, who quickly prepare for impact. Inari asks his teammate to collaborate with him on the attack, but Funo scoffs back, saying he should be the one helping her. Inari wants to prove his worth to Haruto, while Funo is fully determined to make the boy finally recognize her as a great ally. The two shout at each other to get out of the way and deliver a coordinated, devastating blow. Slicing the mid-rank monster in half on the spot, Haruto observes their terrifying determination and thinks they must be truly desperate to win the free grilled meat feast. Outside in the rain, a mysterious figure wearing a hat floats in the air, commenting he gathered great sacrifices and will now test their quality. He draws his long sword under the storm and lightning, preparing to initiate his dark plan against the students inside the hospital. With a single powerful slash of his blade in midair, the intruder destroys the mystical barrier that was protecting and isolating the abandoned hospital area. Immediately, Kusabi, Ozuchi, and Haruto feel a chilling shiver run down their spines due to the drastic, dark shift in the surrounding atmosphere. Inari notices black smoke billowing out of one of the doors and readies himself alongside Funo to attack the next monster that tries to pass through. Suddenly, a colossal, bizarre arm smashes right through the wall, destroying everything and flinging Funo far away. With the immense force of the unexpected impact, Inari shouts worried, asking if she's okay, as a massive mud creature with multiple terrifying heads rises right before their eyes. In a flash, Haruto flies through the air with his sword in hand and executes a precise cut, slicing the monster's arms to protect his teammate. The mud demon collapses, completely sliced onto the hallway floor, and Haruto quickly rushes over to the girl to check if she sustained any injuries. Funo asks, confused if that huge creature was also mid-rank, but Haruto replies he isn't entirely sure what he just faced. He warns that creature was different from the others and tells them to stay alert. When Instructor Kusabi's voice suddenly echoes through the loudspeakers, Kusabi makes an urgent announcement warning that the control barrier was destroyed and that the location's danger level spiked drastically due to miasma. Kusabi warns he is sending a support Shikigami to help each team and commands them to focus solely on defending themselves. Until then, Inari gets worried about the severity of the situation, while Funo suggests they just hold out until the teachers arrive, and Haruto agrees. Suddenly, Muten warns Haruto that the entire area was consumed by miasma, alerting that monsters of a far superior level are about to show up there. His mystical partner gets super serious and explains that an existence of an even more dangerous and elevated rank is about to emerge in the hospital. Haruto stands in shock hearing from Muten that the creature on its way is a terrifying superclass demon, which completely changes the gravity of the danger. The mystical instructor repeats the general alert, stating someone destroyed the mystical control barrier and asks everyone to prioritize personal defense. Exhausted, the youths wonder if they cleared the whole floor, but Haruto warns them not to lower their guard because new enemies could pop up at any moment. The platinum-haired boy agrees with the strategy and decides the best move is to wait until the professor's support, Shikigami, reach them. Suddenly, a massive, violent explosion blows up the hallway wall by surprise, catching the student group completely off guard inside the hospital. While Inari shouts panicked for his teammate, Haruto acts fast and commands Funo to maintain total focus on the new enemy that just emerged. Haruto senses the crushing pressure coming from that giant masked monster, realizing right away that it is a high-rank creature. Funo locks her gaze on the battle and replies her friend doesn't even need to say it, as she also already realized the scale of danger they're facing. Without wasting time, the girl summons her powerful mystical water magic, creating a floating blue serpent that charges swiftly toward the giant. She activates the serpent rain technique to temporarily blind the monster, knowing that even without causing real damage, it will create a perfect opening. Capitalizing on the exact moment the enemy becomes vulnerable, Inari leaps at him, releasing destructive flames with his mystical fire technique. However, the guy's flame strike hits the opponent's arm, and he stands astonished, realizing the creature's skin is hard as solid rock. Seeing his friends struggle, Haruto dashes in rapidly midair and unleashes his powerful severing claw technique to slice through the monster's heavy defense. Upon successfully cutting the giant cleanly, Haruto celebrates relieved, noting he managed to repeat the exact same strike he used in his first battle. Funo slumps down onto the floor, quite exhausted, but breathes a sigh of relief seeing her teammates manage to defeat the threat and are safe. Inari praises Haruto's pinpoint strike, who humbly replies he only managed to win thanks to the distraction his friends created during the fight. Inari is glad to help, but thinks to himself how rapidly and scarily his platinum-haired friend is evolving in just a few short days together. Suddenly, heavy footsteps begin echoing through the destroyed hallway, and someone drops a casual comment right near where the youths are gathered. It's Hunter Ozuchi, who appears accompanied by several mystical beasts, and humorously remarks that by the looks of it, he arrived way too late for the fight. He apologizes for the delay and warns that Haruto's group was the last one left to be rescued, ordering everyone to head to the rendezvous point. Already outside in the rain, the students demand answers regarding the situation, but Kusabi calls for silence and warns he will explain everything just once. The instructor confirms someone destroyed the control barrier on purpose, and that several dangerous high-rank creatures invaded the hospital surroundings. He explains that demons will soon be drawn by the scent of all of them gathered together, prompting Funo to suggest an immediate retreat to save the group. However, Ozuchi pops up showing a chunk of broken rock and warns that unfortunately, the mysterious enemy has zero intention of letting them escape. He takes a step back as a gigantic, mystical wall of dark purple energy begins erecting around the entire area where the students are. The hunter explains that a cursed barrier enclosed the location, and that even if they try to destroy it by force, it will regenerate instantly. Inari panics, but Kusabi calls for calm and explains that despite being cut off from communications, the outside world has definitely noticed this magical anomaly. Ozuchi smirks and says everyone will be safe under Kusabi's protection, making the professor question what his companion plans to do. The elite hunter ignores Kusabi's question and turns toward Haruto, asking if the young man is truly capable of soloing an elite demon with a challenging smile on his face. Ozuchi commands the platinum-haired boy to stay right there at the meeting point to help the professor defend the other students. Kusabi finds it absurd, but the hunter shoots back saying it makes no sense to waste strong warriors and that waiting around doing nothing would be the worst decision. The experienced hunter analyzes the massive size of that mystical barrier and deduces the caster responsible for it must be hidden inside the Naraka. He decides the plan now is super simple and direct, asserting seriously that he will hunt down the mysterious enemy and end him once and for all. After the elite hunter departs, Kusabi calls out to Haruto very seriously, and the young platinum-haired boy promptly acknowledges the call. The instructor seriously warns that he will provide support in combat, but firmly alerts that this mission involves a real danger of perishing for the boy. Haruto doesn't hesitate for even a second and shouts with total resolve that he accepts the mission if it's necessary to save the lives of all his friends. Facing such a firm and immediate response, Kusabi accepts the young warrior's decision and resolves to put the defense plan into action without further delay. He orders the other students to remain at that exact spot under the guard of two massive mystical beasts he summoned and asks Haruto to come along with him. Kusabi proudly comments that he is still a professional demon hunter and that backing up the mystical boy will serve as excellent practical experience. Elite hunter Ozuchi leaves the rear under the instructor's care and takes off at high speed into the storm to find the mystical caster. As he pushes forward through the rain with his summoned beasts, Ozuchi recalls that he was the one who set the priority orders during the student rescue. Kusabi takes position in the rain under his magical umbrella and agrees that in a one-on-one combat, Haruto actually has the strength to defeat an elite enemy. Multiple high-rank monsters emerge from the dark, and the professor warns he will synchronize his mystical abilities with Haruto so he can focus on one at a time. The platinum-haired boy charges at the demons at top speed, landing precise strikes with the aid of the mystical beasts summoned by the professor. Haruto seizes the excellent tactical opportunity and drops from the sky toward one of the elite monsters that was just isolated by the support beasts. He raises his powerful sword of dark energy with both hands, preparing to deliver the mercy blow and slice the enemy once and for all. From afar, the other students stand open-mouthed, commenting shocked about the boy defeating an elite demon all on his own. Haruto turns around humbly and explains he didn't do anything alone, praising the professor's flawless support that predicted his every move. Haruto observes the defeated enemy and quietly reflects on that finally being the true power level of a real professional demon hunter. Suddenly, a massive beam of dark purple energy erupts from the hospital roof, startling everyone around the area. Haruto feels a freezing shiver run through his whole body with that mystical energy explosion, wondering where all that sudden cold is coming from. Kusabi maintains a serious expression under the storm and murmurs that by the looks of it, the terrifying creature they feared so much has finally emerged. The feared superclass demon fully materializes amidst the heavy rain, oozing a terrifying, super heavy purple aura. The monster smirks macabreness as it looks around, commenting that it finally made it to the surface and can smell a rich feast of spiritual energy. The mysterious straw-hatted figure sitting on top of the building points at the students and asks if the monster liked the feast prepared. The intruder reveals he himself prepared the feast in that naraka, stating there are many warriors with manifestation blades ready to be devoured. The superclass monster glares at the mysterious man with a threatening look, questioning if he isn't afraid of ending up getting devoured too. The intruder scoffs at the threat and casually comments that if a monster of that level had been there from the start, he wouldn't have had to put in so much work. While the two chat, Ozuchi comes flying through the air and drops down at high speed, delivering a surprise attack toward the superclass demon. The elite hunter lands on the roof and watches the beast down below, murmuring that a superclass monster really did end up appearing, but that he has another focus. He locks his eyes on the hat guy and thinks he finally found the barrier caster, figuring it would be awesome to manage to capture him alive. Showing zero fear, Ozuchi walks casually and passes right beside the superclass giant, leaving the creature rather confused. Annoyed by the human's audacity, the superclass monster attempts to deliver a violent strike against him, screaming for him not to cross his path without permission. In an extremely fast, effortless movement, Ozuchi dodges the furious attack and slashes the superclass demon's arm with his sharp blade. He casts a cold, terrifying glare at the monster, disdainfully warning that a mere superclass demon like him should just keep quiet in his corner. The monster falls into panic upon seeing the hunter's speed, realizing in terror that it won't stand a chance of winning combat against that human. So, the beast decides to switch targets and runs desperately toward the students in the courtyard to devour them first and gain more power. Ozuchi pops up right behind the creature in the blink of an eye, repeating in a very calm, sarcastic tone that he already warned him to stay quiet. But suddenly, heavy iron chains pop out of nowhere violently and block the hunter's strike, halting his advance abruptly in the rain. To the hunter's surprise, the mystical chains begin wrapping rapidly around his arms and legs, yanking him with extreme violence within seconds. Ozuchi is completely bound by the heavy iron chains and ends up totally immobilized in the middle of the courtyard. The elite hunter realizes he made a severe mistake by falling into that trap and deduces those cursed chains belong directly to the caster. The hat enemy floats down from the roof and mocks the warrior, asking if he should slice him into little pieces to make the monster's meal easier. The iron chains begin squeezing Ozuchi's body with unnatural force, causing blood to spurt and severely wounding the elite hunter. With his body severely injured and unable to react, Ozuchi collapses onto the muddy ground of the courtyard under the desperate gazes of his allies. The mysterious villain lands calmly before him in the heavy rain and mockingly asks if the hero was actually planning on capturing him alive. The intruder flashes a mean smirk and arrogance, saying the elite warrior definitely overestimated himself by thinking he'd win that fight. Yuma Ozuchi is struck with extreme violence by the sharp chains, causing blood to spurt as his body gets sliced mid-courtyard. The mysterious hat enemy observes the area from above and orders the monster to start the feast, devouring whatever it wants. Suddenly, a giant foot of a terrifying monster drops from the sky and stomps hard onto the ground right beside Haruto Kamakiri. The supreme rank demon stares closely at Haruto with a hungry gaze, saying up close, he looks even more delicious. Haruto stands trembling as he senses the demon's terrible murderous intent. Realizing that presence is totally different from anything before, the monster charges fiercely at another terrified student, shouting that it wants to take just one bite out of him. In the blink of an eye, Professor Kusabi dashes in with his sword and chops off the demon's arm with a precise slice to save the student. The student falls to the ground terrified, while Professor Kusabi prepares to fight alongside his summoned spiritual tiger. With a serious look, Kusabi asks the demon who gave him permission to direct his murderous intent toward his students. The demon backs off surprised, realizing that Professor is on the exact same power level as the elite hunter from before. The student continues shaking in terror on the ground, thinking he would have been devoured had Professor Kusabi not been there. Kusabi finds the situation very strange and wonders how a supreme-rank demon managed to bypass Yuma Ozuchi. The enemy asks if Kusabi is worried about his useless friend and activates green magic circles around the professor. Telling him not to move, Kusabi realizes it's teleportation magic and shouts for Haruto to hold on tight as the students notice the professor was moved away from them. The students look around in total disbelief, seeing Professor Kusabi vanished in the middle of the rain. Haruto panics at the dire situation, but tries to pull himself together and tells himself he needs to move no matter what. The demon lets out a mean smirk and celebrates, realizing that annoying human finally vanished from the scene. Relieved by the professor's absence, the monster turns toward the helpless group of students with an intimidating presence. The demon roars hungry, saying it's time to fill its stomach with that feast, but Haruto steps in front with his sword. Haruto decides he will have to defeat that supreme-rank demon alone, since Professor Kusabi is no longer there. The young man rushes forward at top speed and uses Severing Claw to deliver a strike against the monster's neck. Haruto's attack is insanely fast and manages to sever the demon's arm, which falls to the wet ground. The monster backs up a bit and calls Haruto's attention with a calm, ironic tone while holding its cut arm. The demon praises Haruto's mystical blade and admits his sword almost reached its neck for a split second. Haruto stands shocked, seeing the enemy manage to dodge such a direct, fast strike from an unfavorable position. To Haruto's despair, the left arm he just cut off is already regenerating, indicating normal cuts won't work. The MC realizes the enemy maintained distance from him and Kusabi, deducing the monster is protecting its own neck. Decided to win, Haruto rushes the demon again, believing there must be some part of its body it cannot heal. Haruto unleashes another powerful attack, but the monster moves swiftly and manages to deflect the strike effortlessly. The demon scoffs at the boy, saying his sword might be top class, but the wielder is just a third-rate warrior. With the heavy impact of the monster's counterattack, Haruto ends up falling to his knees on the ground in heavy pain. The demon is surprised to notice it failed to eliminate him and wonders if the youth concentrated spiritual energy to avoid the lethal blow. Calling Haruto an insolent brat, the monster walks calmly in his direction to finish off the boy's life. Once and for all, Haruto uses his sword with great difficulty to block a devastating punch from the supreme-rank demon with the tremendous force of the impact. The young hunter is hurled backward, sliding across the wet courtyard floor. The monster charges at Haruto once more, getting confused as it notices the boy can still react. The demon notes that the boy not only defended with spiritual power, but also tracked its movements with his eyes to shift the damage away. Seeing the boy as a pretty problematic opponent, the demon decides to use its full power to eliminate him without giving defensive chances. Meanwhile, Kusabi pops back up on the roof of a hospital and realizes he was pulled away from his students by a trap. The professor gets alarmed upon seeing a massive pool of blood scattered across the floor of the abandoned hospital roof. Without time to react, heavy chains emerge out of nowhere and bind Kusabi's arms, trapping him violently. Kusabi tries to use his mystical blade to slice the mystical bindings and free himself from that restraint as fast as possible. However, the professor stands in shock as he realizes his sword's blade passed right through the chains without causing any damage. The hat enemy pops up right behind Kusabi and coldly warns he will spill his blood right there on the roof. Suddenly, Yuma Ozuchi dashes in with his sword and blocks the villain's lethal blow, saving Kusabi at the very last second. The hat villain steps back, surprised, and lets out a murmur upon seeing his surprise attack was blocked unexpectedly. Ozuchi offers a calm smile and asks Kusabi if he's okay, showing he still has strength left to fight. Kusabi apologizes for the situation and thanks his companion for saving his life in that critical moment. Yuma firmly grips his sword hilt, which begins glowing with wood mystical energy that wraps around his arms. The villain realizes his blade bears the wood attribute with mystical healing, which explains how he survived having his body split. Yuma explains he took a bit to arrive because he was teleported far away by the enemy prior to combat, worried about the situation down below. Kusabi tells Yuma to stop worrying about him and sprint back to help the students. The hat villain uses his mystical chains to block Yuma's path and asks if he really thought he'd be allowed to leave. He reveals his face under the hood and mockingly says, "The supreme rank demon is enjoying its meal at this very moment." Displaying a cynical smile, the man warns he will keep both hunters plenty busy until the monster finishes devouring everyone. Kusabi gets furious at the provocation, but Yuma places a hand in front of him to stop the professor from acting impulsively. Yuma advises Kosi not to fall for cheap taunts and suggests the two defeat the enemy together as fast as possible. The villain agrees and scoffs, saying that if the students are lucky, they'll manage to hold out on their own for just 30 seconds. Yuma smiles and warns his opponent not to underestimate the rookies, reminding him that he and Kusabi graduated from the same military academy in the courtyard. The demon delivers a frantic sequence of strikes against Haruto, mocking and shouting that the boy is way too slow. The other students scream frantic as they see the damage the violent combat is causing right before their eyes. Haruto realizes the enemy outperforms him in everything and panics over failing to land a single hit of his severing claw. Haruto knows he will be defeated if he stays purely on defense, so he decides to go all in to find a tiny opening. Suddenly, a barrage of green wind needles is fired against the supreme rank demon, catching the monster by surprise. Right after, a wheel of blazing fire charges with full force against the demon to keep it cornered in the rain. Funo and Inari dash in with their weapons to support Haruto, who stands surprised and shouts his teammates' names. Haruto warns the opponent is a supreme rank demon and that it's way too dangerous, but Inari replies that's precisely why they must fight. Inari smiles with resolve and asserts they could never just stand by watching without doing anything. Since they're teammates, Inari admits he and Funo can't inflict a fatal wound on the monster alone, but they are there for another reason. He says they can at least create a distraction to help Haruto, who understands his friend's attack plan. Haruto warns he will charge toward the demon and asks for help from his two teammates to carry out the assault. The demon passes through the flames effortlessly and mocks the attack, stating that wall of fire won't even slow it down. At that moment, Funo activates her water magic and conjures the Serpent Rain technique against the supreme rank demon. The clash between water and fire instantly creates a massive curtain of smoke and steam around the confused monster. Even unable to see clearly through the steam, the supreme rank demon smirks and says the attempt is foolish. Suddenly, Haruto drops from above through the smoke and locks in his determination to capitalize on that fraction of a second. The demon attempts to counter with a claw swipe, but stands in shock, realizing it just hit a body made of water. Funo smirks mockingly and alerts her opponent that he just attacked her fake water decoy. Capitalizing on the flawless distraction, Haruto delivers an extremely violent and precise slash across the demon's back. Funo and Inari watch the smoke curtain anxiously, wondering if Haruto's attack finally took effect on the monster. However, Haruto lets out a scream of terror as he realizes the demon reacted brutally even after taking the strike. The monster's severed hand falls onto the muddy floor of the abandoned hospital courtyard as the smoke starts clearing. The demon moves at top speed and leaps back to gain distance from Haruto in the heavy rain. Inari panics seeing that the arm Haruto just cut off regenerated before even touching the ground. The young hunters realize horrified that the demon's absurd regeneration capability is far too monstrous. Suddenly, the severed arm lying on the ground begins inflating bizarrely and pulsating with mysterious energy. The demon admits to itself it was caught off guard 3 times in a row by those youths' combined attacks. The monster says that is humiliating, but decides to activate a destructive skill, building up heavy dark energy. The demon launches its own severed fist directly at Funo with overwhelming speed and force. Funo tries to stay calm to dodge the attack, thinking it's just a distraction to pull her eyes off the monster. Haruto senses real danger and screams, desperate for Funo to dodge the blow as fast as she can. The launched fist begins glowing intensely with a terrifying red energy about to detonate in mid-air. In a split second, an extremely destructive purple energy explosion occurs, hitting the courtyard with full force. The demon uses its explosive technique and warns with an intimidating glare that it won't spare effort to finish them off anymore. Funo collapses onto the ground, severely injured, realizing horrified that the enemy's skill consists of detonating parts of its own body. Inari reveals he managed to activate a defense barrier in time thanks to Haruto's warning, but the damage taken was still immense. Haruto looks around alarmed as the monster begins throwing and detonating more chunks of its body across the battlefield. With a sadistic smirk, the supreme rank demon readies another part of its body to launch at the young hunters. Haruto sees the mystical fist flying in his direction and readies himself to dodge the explosive strike, but suddenly realizes something terrible. Haruto realizes in despair that if he dodges the explosive blow, the attack will hit Inari dead center right behind him. Haruto dives in front to protect Inari, shouting annoyed while trying to block the launched fist with his own body. The mystical fist detonates violently right in front of him, engulfing the young man in a terrible explosion of destructive purple energy. Haruto grinds his teeth, feeling agonizing pain as his body absorbs the full impact of that magical detonation. The demon smirks sadistically and asserts it already figured the boy would sacrifice himself to shield his teammate. The magical blast spreads with full force across the hospital courtyard, devastating everything around with destructive energy. Seeing his friend take the devastating blow, dead center to save him, Inari screams frantically for Haruto's name. The demon laughs cruelly at the youth's suffering and mocks, saying human beings are extremely fragile creatures. Funo watches the blast damage, completely horrified and injured, unable to believe what just happened. Lying on the rain-soaked floor and covered in severe wounds, Haruto can barely stay conscious, realizing he can no longer fight. Worried, Inari turns to Funo in a hurry and asks if she has the ability to use any mystical healing magic. Funo replies a bit unsure that she isn't a professional healer, but admits she can cast at least a basic spell. Relieved, Inari asks his teammate to heal Haruto's wounds as much as possible, even if it's just basic treatment. The young man draws his sword and stands ready before the supreme rank demon, warning he will fight to buy time. Inari thinks to himself that if not even Haruto managed to defeat the monster, they need to heal him to have any shot at victory. Knowing the other students are paralyzed with fear and that he himself doesn't know how to heal, Inari takes the responsibility to act, wrapped in his orange flames. Inari shouts that he's counting on Funo to heal their friend, as he knows he won't hold out long solo. With a serious, resolute expression, Funo nods her head and says she understood the important task she received from her partner. Haruto tries desperately to stand up, but frustratedly realizes his severely wounded body can't move even a millimeter. Inari sighs to try and calm down, and warns the demon he will show him that not even a side dish should be underestimated. The boy activates his mystical technique, creating several flame illusion copies around the demon to confuse the opponent's vision. The demon dodges the attacks with extreme ease and mocks Inari's mystical technique, calling it a very sloppy trick. The monster dares the boy to stop using cheap illusions and try attacking it directly with his real body if he has the guts. The demon notes that although the illusion is low quality, the human is mixing his real body with the copies to fool him. Inari reflects amid the heat of the flames on the previous detonation, thinking he could have dodged had he been alone. The boy realizes with deep sadness that he only ended up taking damage from the blast because Haruto jumped in front of him to protect him. He remembers when he used to say their relationship was just fake friends and feels guilty seeing that Haruto risked his life for that. Inari shouts with resolve that he doesn't care about the price to pay to buy time, begging for Haruto not to perish there. But the supreme rank demon suddenly pops up right in front of him and realizes instantly which of those copies is Inari's real body. Inari stands in shock, realizing the monster used its own severed fist to locate him and block his charge with ease. Without giving reaction time to the young hunter, the monster delivers a violent counterstrike against Inari amidst the flames. Haruto watches the scene horrified from the ground, letting out a groan of pure agony. Seeing his friend get attacked while unable to do anything, Inari lets out an unbearable scream of pain as his leg gets severely injured by the monster's relentless counterattack. Feeling a terrible pain that almost makes him pass out, Inari thinks regretfully that he shouldn't have tried to act so heroic there. The demon scoffs at the young man's suffering, explaining that the mystical energy he used for the illusions ended up giving away his real body. The monster says it already picked who will be the first to be devoured and points its glowing hand toward Haruto. Haruto watches that with immense rage and tries to force his broken body to move by any means to save his friend Inari. The demon walks slowly in the rain and warns it hasn't finished enjoying its feast with the helpless students, even crying in pain and shaking heavily. Inari stands up with difficulty and challenges the monster to keep fighting him. The supreme rank demon looks with disdain at the pathetic scene and asks if there is any point in standing there trembling in pain. Inari timidly agrees and admits to himself that this kind of heroic attitude doesn't fit his style of being at all. However, he remembers how Haruto risked his own life to protect him from that terrible magic detonation minutes ago. Crying in pain and frustration, Inari shouts that he hasn't sunk so low as to abandon a friend who almost lost his life to save him. Funo observes Inari's heroic resolve with tears in her eyes while continuing to concentrate her healing magic on Haruto. Inari places all his faith in Haruto's strength, knowing that this risky gamble is the only chance they have to survive the demon. The young hunter screams with all his strength and charges at the demon, asserting that a life-or-death gamble demands total commitment. The supreme rank demon considers that heroic resolve a joke and advances swiftly to crush the boy once and for all. The monster knocks Inari to the ground with total ease and mocks his enthusiasm for wanting to be the first one devoured with a sadistic, monstrous smile. The demon opens its massive maw full of sharp teeth to devour the fallen young hunter. Haruto reaches out his trembling hand in despair and begs for the monster to stop, ordering his body frantically to move in time. He repeats to himself over and over that he needs to move faster to save his friend's life before he gets devoured by the demon. With his eyes bloodshot with fury, Haruto mentally begs for his body to react and move once and for all. However, a fast and unexpected mystical attack suddenly surges to interrupt the demon's bite at the very last instant. Surprised by the speed of the sudden blow, the demon retreats quickly and crouches to reassess the situation in the courtyard. Haruto appears holding his friend and thanks Inari for trusting him until the end, emanating a terrifying purple energy. The monster stands completely shocked, unable to grasp how the young hunter managed to cross all that distance in a single moment. With his eyes glowing red, Haruto assures his injured friend that he will definitely save him from that terrifying monster. The demon realizes with amazement that Haruto's manifestation blade has begun changing shape and glowing with a fresh energy. The mystical entity Muten observes the boy and explains that the reason Haruto managed to use his 10 claws was his intense desire. That fervent wish and his strong conviction were the true elements responsible for allowing him to reach such power. And now, an overwhelming wave of intense emotions begins awakening a new dormant power inside the MC's weapon. Muten wonders with curiosity if Haruto finally managed to reach the level necessary to awaken his new secret claw.